Okay, I'm gonna
Oh,
record
she ended
this.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of people. I do have my mask. I thought if I get too, I've already been close to people, but you know.
Yeah,
What are you gonna do?
I know. It's weird time. So
Are you ready?
I think I'm good whenever. It looks like maybe got one straggler in here. I guess I can introduce you.
I can introduce myself.
Okay.
We just
I think we're good to go. Maybe I'll ask who needs a copy of this stuff before you get going, so I can go. I'll ask who needs a copy of this.
Yeah, that yellow one.
So just this one, informational one.
Yeah, I'll bring the information. I'll get a better one of that, because that's for secondary anyway, usually. So, I mean, it's, they didn't grab it right now. I had to call in to. So.
Okay. All right, good morning. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, thank you everybody for coming in. I know not everybody's ready to be back in school mode right now, but that's okay. We're glad that you're here. Glad that you've given up your time. Appreciate that. First of all, I'm going to ask a couple of questions. There were some handouts up front. There's a 6-trait packet and then a 6-point writing scoring guide. If you did not get one of those, will you raise your hand so I can get a count on how many copies I need to make? So 1, 2, 3. All right. Sounds good. Okay. What's that? Oh, that's fine.
I have one quick announcement. I'm going to butt in while they're doing copies. This is the important piece of paper of the day. You will see your name and today's date. If you're here, please sign it because it's $50 for coming to this morning session. So you want to make sure you sign the list, and then tomorrow the same list, $50. Well, however long the session is, $25 an hour. So this section is actually longer than that, isn't it? It's like $100, I think. So I said that wrong, but sign here so you make sure you get paid.
Right. And we have Patty Willis with us from the Northwest RPDC. She's going to be doing some writing training, so I'm going to turn it over to her. We can get started.
Okay, and hi, everybody. I'm just going to go through a few quick slides, introduce myself just a little bit. I know several of you, so it's nice to see some friendly faces here, and kind of get back into the groove again, because I hardly have done any face-to-face trainings because life, right? So just the way things are. So I'm going to go through a couple things here. This is me. You can see some of my great nieces and nephews over here, extended a little bit. I don't have any grandchildren, but I do have a grand dog. So you see Roxy right here. And my daughter is actually visiting from San Diego through the summer. And Roxy is with us. And my daughter talked us into adopting a puppy. And oh my gosh, that was, I mean, I could not believe how much work that is. I'd forgotten, it's like having a kid. My husband's like, oh my gosh, but we had to have a dog. You said, get a dog, and so anyway, we're getting used to her. Love to travel. This is just, I think, what's it called? Los Bluffs now. That we just love to go over there, get close to nature. When we can get to San Diego, that's one of our favorite places to go. The beach. Been here. This is like a real picture from my camera file. I mentioned no grandkids, but I do, like I said, have a lot of great nieces and nephews. And this is the only one I have on my side of the family. And this is Elena, and she's just the cutest little thing ever. So I have to brag on her. My husband farms. He's a rural mail carrier as well. That we were one of the farms got a windmill. So you can see, again, nephews, that's my daughter in the middle, kind of hard to see, but anyway, just standing in front of the windmill. And those things, if you've never been to one, holy cow, those things are massive. I can't believe how big those are. So I've been with the RPDC probably, I think about 16 years. I'm looking at Marty because I've known Marty a long time too. And back in the day. So anyway, been there. Literacy's my focus. I'll be taking on a new role this coming year because I'm going to do the Missouri Teacher Development System. So I'll be working with the beginning teachers, Year 2 teachers, Teacher Academy, which is a passion of mine, which Marty's going to help me with this coming year, and Teacher Academy grads. So I have some alums in here as well that have participated in Teacher Academy in the past. So ever interested in that, let me know. But my passion is writing, sixth grade writing. And I know we have some other people in here as well who are very passionate about writing and could probably stand right where I am right now and talk to you and tell you just what I would tell you about writing. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce with a little cartoon here. Charlie Brown, my essay. Yes, ma'am, I have it right here. But I couldn't write 1,000 words. I only wrote 8. Detail, well, yes, I suppose I could have gone into more detail. But with the kind of summers I have, I just try to forget. So I think that sometimes with kids, they end up, you want them to write some different things, but they just are very generic. So with that being said, you have a packet. Some of you have a packet, some of you might not yet. And we're going to be using some of those materials and resources today for just an overview. And then tomorrow we'll get into more detail with our, when we're broken down into like elementary and middle school, high school, all right? I am going to warn you ahead of time. I had surgery about 3 weeks ago, and I am still officially on recovery mode. So there are going to be times I'm going to sit down, or there may be times I just need to take a break. So just be prepared for that, just to let you know. So really, what is writing? So as we go through this, I want you to talk to your neighbor, somebody at your table, and I want you to talk, what was your worst, absolute worst experience as a writer? This absolute worst.
Freshman year. I really like that.
And is Sam, that's one thing I forgot to check. You have-
Oh, well, no, but you can do. See if I can find it.
I have my speakers, but they're not really.
Oh, I've got that. Too. It's really organized too.
Yeah.
Massive doors here, but-
I might pull it right here, Brian.
Oh, there you go.
In the classroom. you were one of them.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you to come to the end of your conversation in 3, 2, and 1. Oh, you guys are good. Yeah. So anybody want to share out what their worst experience was as a writer? Or did you hear one that someone shared at your table? Yes.
I would say we didn't really have any particular one experience. We talked about kind of frustrations, and sometimes it was a frustration about like the purpose behind writing, like not really knowing why you're doing it. Because then it's hard to really invest yourself in it if you don't see the purpose. And that's what Sarah said. And then mine was trying to figure out how, like, if you have an idea over here and an idea over here, just trying to figure out how to fit it together. So we talk more about frustrations.
That's fine. That can be an experience in and of itself right there. Anyone else have one that they want to share? I've gotten really good at wait time. Yeah, go ahead, Becky.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, I was just filling up the space.
Okay, we were just talking about in college how I remember turning in my first paper and my first comp class and thinking I was a decent writer and getting
We're
a
gonna
C.
tell the
But
same story.
yeah, okay, see, and no feedback, just a C, up there, and I'm thinking, oh, why did I get a C? And that was hard for me coming from a small school where I had a lot of support and feedback. And she kind of was talking about her teacher. You can expand on that if you'd like.
So I just had a teacher that, and this was in college, but I had done fine all throughout college, and then he just kind of like ripped it apart and this new teacher. So
Oh,
didn't give much feedback to anyone.
That wasn't negative, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
so very motivating then for you to want to write
Yeah,
more,
right,
right? So that's kind of, I had the same experience in college as well. I shouldn't say the name, somebody might be related to him, but I had the same thing, got it back, red marks all over it, got a C, and I was like, I had always gotten A's, in high school, but small school, same experience. So that, it really discouraged me. I did not want to write anymore. So when we think about that, let's go back to your best experience. What was something that just made you want to write more? That you wanted to think, hey, yes, I can do this. I love it.
Okay, I was going to say, do we have any comments right now? Younger brother's kids. Oh, no, yes. Over here. And I need to have two.
Next one's a video, so we'll see if the video works.
Some of them come for a semester. Right, the big year while
You can put one more on the back wall and then I need one Like one on, like Sunday, like. They'll probably have to put them on tables.
Yeah, right here.
And look at figuring out my directions. West, right? I'm looking at houses and different.
Yeah.
I needed that, like, I'm sitting down.
I think you got them both back there, maybe. Well, I put one on those shelves, but it's not in a very good spot.
Thank you.
Probably my best experience. My worst experience is probably my best.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to come back in 3, 2, and 1. Since you're all teachers, I know you guys already know quiet signals. Normally I introduce them. I didn't do a very good job of that, but you're all, advanced learners, so you got it down. So what about your best experience? Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
We talked about back here that it was the presenting of it, like if we had to write a speech and then getting to present that speech in a debate or presenting our writing. Because we could explain it better than what we can write.
It's an interesting perspective on that. Yeah. Okay, thanks for sharing. Anyone else have a good experience they want to talk about? This is a good thing. Go ahead.
I was in 5th grade and I just switched schools and I was really, really nervous and I felt like, oh, I don't know if I can do this in this new place and really nervous. But the teacher that I had, she was doing, okay, we're gonna do writer's workshop. What is this? But she was really positive, and I mean, I know you guys had talked about feedback and that is a big thing. She was just really reassuring. And I was like, I can do this. Like, I'm gonna look at me go. And so it was positive reinforcement and positive feedback. So that was something that was helped. It made me feel like I was competent. And I could do that.
That you were successful. And you could go ahead and continue to grow. Very good teacher to have, right? Anyone else have a good story to share? Okay.
So when I was a senior here in high school, I took college English with Mrs. Jelovich, and she didn't get out 100%.
No, she did not. No, that's right.
Like a memorial or remembrance of 9/11, and I got 100% of that.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Hey, you were done. You could have graduated then and life was good, right? Oh, yeah, that is something. You need to have that framed. That's all I Yeah. So when you think about this, the energy totally changed in the room when I asked you to talk about your worst experience versus your best experience. I mean, there was just so much more positive energy going on. And a lot of your kids are going to have the same kind of reaction to writing. And it's not a bad idea even to ask your kiddos, what's been your, worst experience? I always start out with the worst because you can think of those right off the bat and then go to your best. What's working for you? I think it gives you some really good insight to how they feel about writing and what their experience has been in the past. So I would encourage you to do that with your students, to go ahead and ask them, what works for you? you know, what hasn't worked for you, but what does work for you. It'll take a little bit, maybe, bless you, maybe take a little bit there at the beginning, that you can get them started, and that's very powerful and gives you some really good information to go from instructionally to help your kids out. So as we go on, I want to show this video. We're going to hope that this works and their sound is up. Let me pause it just a minute because you need to be able to hear this.
It's way too long.
Coming from right now, moving to middle. Yeah, just going that freestyle. This is what we did, you all day long. Yeah, so here we come again. Bring it back up. We're standing there, brothers and friends. Back now, up. These girls going, go, 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 go.
Okay, just a little info there at the beginning. Ellen was talking about this little guy. He's oh gosh, I think he was 2 and he's a rapper. And I want you to think about what was helping him be successful as a rapper. Just go ahead and have some conversation at your table. What was going on?
And not correcting. I have a tendency to do that with me. Correct them. And as teens, they don't say thank you for that suggestion anymore.
Like when I was in the little things that I would like, like cutting your meat,
No.
right place. I'm just trying to. So.
All right, so I'm going to ask you to come back. What were some of the things that helped this little guy feel like he was a rapper?
His hype man.
What?
His hype man.
He was really getting into it. Anything else that you noticed that encouraged him? Go ahead, Marty.
He knew the structure. He didn't have the words, but he was rapping sounds. So he knew kind of the format of
Mhm.
what it was supposed to sound like.
So he had that going for him. Anything else you noticed about this?
We talked more about like his feelings and the way the parent or whoever reacted to him and looked at him and, yeah, supported him. Like the kids can tell so quickly when they look at your face, and it determines quickly how they feel about themselves and the work that they just produce or show people.
So like the hype man, kind of, yeah, getting going. Thanks, Betsy. when you're thinking about this, that's exactly what was going on. I mean, he was being encouraged. And when you looked at the adult that was there with him, who I think is his father, I didn't watch the whole Ellen segment there, but what was he doing? What was his, reaction to this little guy? He was going ahead with hand gestures. The body language was very positive. He is smiling. He's like, giving him a chance to talk. He wasn't correcting him all the time, right? He was going ahead and getting that little guy to move on, making him feel successful. And just like we were talking about earlier about your best experience as a writer, it was those people, like you were talking about your teacher, who made you feel successful, that you could do this and giving you that chance. And then also the father was modeling for him as well, right? Which was key. So we need to remember that as writing, you want to be sure that you're modeling the writing experience, and it doesn't have to be perfect on your part. You can make a mistake and you have to think, oh yeah, I need to go back and fix this. But that's what this father was doing. And I like this. It's such a kind of a cool analogy in a way to have, looking at it from that perspective and the power of feedback for someone who's learning something new and giving them that chance. So that's something I want you to keep in your minds as we move forward through our 6th trait overview today that we will get to, I promise. So one of the things I want to do here, and since I live in Maryville, I do have an idea of the directions in this building where we're going. But one of the things I want you to do just solo right now is I want you to think about from a perspective of writing, and we're going to do what I call compass points, is first of all, I want you to put on your paper just an N. So if you have something to write on, or you can write on the back of the handout. And speaking of the handouts, by the way, there's going to be some that some of you need and some that some of you don't. And the information one I need to redo. I had to call the office to get the copies made, and they copied only one part of the information. That's the yellow scoring guide. So we'll get that fixed later today. So on the north, something that you need to know or do for your students to be writers. So I just want you to jot down something. So by the end, something that you need to know or something you need to do to help your student become writers. And then you can see here by the S, I want you to put an S down on your paper. What are some steps you need to take in order for that to happen? And by the E for East, what excites you about writing? What excites you about helping your students become writers? And then by the W, what worries or wonders do you have about writing? You might not have a worry, but you might have a wonder as to how to do something, whatever. Teaching me. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is on the tables, where you might, I think on most of them, there are markers. And they are the smelling markers. So I think everybody has smelly ones, if I remember right. If you didn't get any markers, you may have to ask a neighboring table to borrow one. And just make sure like at least one person at your table has a marker and that you both agree on the scent to pick. That doesn't matter. And what I'm going to ask you is you're going to take your notes with you and you're going to go to some chart paper in a little bit, but not yet. And you're going to go ahead and have discussion about what your need to knows are, what steps you're concerned about, worries, wonders, but also those things that are exciting for you. When you get to your chart, I'm going to ask you if you go to there's 2 chart papers here. I want about 5 people of each. So I'll tell you which tables are going to go where. When you get there, if you're the first ones there, I want you to put a W because that's the west wall, right? Not the west wing, but the west wall. And then over here, when you get to this, be north, right? Yep. Okay, and then over here, east. So there's a couple over here. And then there's some back over here for the south wall. So you're, I know Pitt's put some up so he can direct you if you can't find it. All right, and I'm going to have, let's have you 2 tables go right over here to one of those chart papers. And let's see how we can work this out. Let's go ahead and keep you 2 tables. Why don't you guys go back to one of those charts, back here on the west wall. And then back here, Betsy's table. Why don't you guys come over here to the north? And I'm going to have our back table. Let's see, there's 3 of you guys, right? Let's go ahead and have, let me see here. Let's just go ahead and have you guys do the one right behind you, all right? And Marty, let's have your table go ahead and go right up here to this one. And then see.
I'm sorry, that one, but just,
I'm
okay.
going to have you all. I'm going to have, we're down here.
Oh, do we need our markers?
Your
So,
marker.
yeah.
Let's go ahead and have your table right here. I haven't forgot about you guys. Great job. Let's have you guys debating. Why don't you guys get it? Go ahead. Nobody else can do it. And
Is purple good?
yeah, I had an extra one right here. Yeah. So I was that one. Okay, so once you get there, have conversation about your direction words. So if you're at the W, that's the wonders and worries. Go ahead and see if you have some that are in common. Just, try to take down some notes about some generalities that you all might have concerns about. Or there might be something that you haven't even thought about. It's like, oh my gosh, I need to put that down. Okay, and then we're going to, when I give you direction, you're going to rotate to the next chart. You're going to look and see, is there something different? And the south, you guys might end up with a extra chart paper there. Okay, let's work it out. All right. Yeah, so whichever one, and if it's difficult to write, thanks Lisa so much. If your chart paper is at some place where it's difficult to write, your grown-ups, you can figure it out, okay? All right. Yeah, and you guys need to put an N on yours for me. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So I'd say, I just need to know what ideas that they want to have about. Yeah, or what they know already, what they've done before, I guess. Or just, yeah, what ideas they have. As long as they can tell me that, right, that they have no clue. Right. What you want. Like I said, or I said modifications. I mean, then, that was the man. Yeah. I think I was thinking more general, like I need to know what are we looking for second graders to write? Yes, so that would be a goal. Yeah, you know the goal for the students. Okay. Like how captures, like topic sentences and stuff like that. What are some tell them what. Yeah, communicate that to them so
Good. Yeah. Good.
or just come up with a goal, the objective. How do you want me to write this? Just you need to know.
I'm going to give you one more minute at this chart before I ask you to switch.
Should I add so we can effectively communicate them?
So you have about 45 seconds to get something on your chart paper if you haven't yet. You guys are like rocking it. You're ready to go.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I have to like see it.
I'm trying to get Josh to come teacher. I know he would. Sandy Wood told me some.
Then
She's been harassing you, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
It's 6 words.
There you go.
Robert.
A word, a few words.
Okay. 10-second countdown. And I'm going to ask you to rotate to the next chart, please. So ladies, you will go up here. So you're going clockwise, so you guys will go right over here. To another piece, you might want to see.
I think this is.
Hey, you guys go.
We bullet. We wrote a whole. We need to do this. We need to go to these.
Yeah, but it's okay. You guys have to, right? No, just, no, I want you to stay at this. Yep. Oh, just read it.
Okay, I can't follow you. We're gonna make a bullet and we're gonna.
Okay, this is my direction for you. You're still, some of you will be at the same direction chart. But what I want you to do is to look at that chart and see if they have some of the same thoughts that you did. If there's a ditto moment where you can go ahead and say yes and star it. Or maybe you have a question about what was put down.
that you want to go ahead and elaborate on. Okay, so just go ahead and read. If you've got some totally new direction, it's going to get easier.
I see it. I see the last word.
You're going to address that. So like you guys.
Oh, communicate the
South,
objectives.
west.
Communicate
So
with
now
the
you're
children.
going to down maybe wonders, worries, or maybe there's one up there that you totally agree with and you want to start or exclamation point.
See grandma.
Maybe you have a question about what was down. Go ahead and jot that down.
Okay. So I think we mark it, and then we should add.
Should we
No, there.
start? We agree.
Yeah.
Can I do we can teach the kids how to make a star? I know, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, no, he kept. Yeah, yeah, and then I need to start a conversation too. And I said, how to make it. And then he said, well, I'm sure it's the secret, which would be leaving you. So I just. It's obviously not. He's really trying.
Okay, take that.
Somewhere else. That wants, yeah. And then
I don't know.
he sales. And then this guy's.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to finish up your conversation. Give you a minute to wrap it up, and then I'm going to have you rotate.
But you do anything. Obviously, no fight.
We can take it.
That place.
Yeah, we will. All right.
It's not our time.
Timing is different than our
Yeah.
time sometimes.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, no, it's.
Yes. And 30 seconds.
No, she has time, but we can't prepare, but it's obviously. And I just was trying to show you retirement. Like, yeah.
And I hear a lull in the conversation, so I think we're ready to rotate to your next part.
I heard I missed you singing in the fair.
Oh, it was amazing.
Were you?
No, it was all right.
I didn't.
Oh, you didn't?
No, Michelle messaged me, she's like, Brian's on stage, and I did, but I didn't see her. Obviously, I didn't hear
So she was there.
Yeah,
Oh, I
she's
saw
like-
her earlier. Okay.
No, this is an interview.
No, we also provide, I went
Exactly.
this is one narrative, this was opinion writing.
I guess, should we add more to this then?
I don't know.
Same thing?
You can't just start, they have something down there that you agree with, you're just commenting on their thoughts. And maybe it will stimulate something that you might have, I need to go against. That you had. Share that, right?
But you can put that in issues like here, we need to know the objectives of the students, so we can.
We were talking.
I truly like you have that. I said, hey, you can. One thing, I would think is how much time do we have to actually go through this? I mean, you're telling me
You're showing them each time the kids sit in here, have conversations around that and what they see and what they know. What they know. That would be nice.
I feel like we do that
It
too.
felt like,
because
it felt like the city got that.
Right, we have
It is.
your time and also
And I would
talk
put that.
about- you can do a lot of
That's
different-
something that you can show them. Really good video that I'll show you tomorrow. Shows me teachers doing this. I think it's.
And then they were like.
I think the video is back. Kids are doing it. And I don't want to say more than that. Because there's things I'll let you guys
So like maybe like,
I
so
think
like model, like need to model and need to give them time to look at
giving them
examples.
you know, about what the baby is. That's one thing, and I'll probably say this, you guys will probably say it later, but daily oral language. There's a lot of factors in there. Because what the kids are seeing is really good example. And the kids knows what's happening. Now, what do you notice about trends? And I thought, ooh, I really like
Find the causes.
yeah, because then you want to replicate that you're right. So when you're showing them different examples, you know, you want to be.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So we need to, I know, we need to allow.
You are finished, I think you are, so I got the
to look
conversation,
at
go ahead, rotate to the next chart,
models.
please, in your next direction. Okay, you guys
What is
put down here the web chart.
And
You guys want to-
exemplars. Yes. Do you want me to put that? You can. You don't have to.
Exemplars, like you from Great Britain or something.
I know.
I don't know where
You
that.
know, such exemplary writing. Oh, just use good, okay. Sorry. You know, we could examine our adjectives.
tell you
here, but-
I'll tell you
but
a
we're gonna go
spelling
with
trick.
good. Something else that I was thinking about her.
Excitement. You can't put together sounds together, and they're constantly. Turtle, and they're just like.
Yeah, what are sounds? They try to sound out.
Yeah, so, yeah.
A little more.
Really, and I don't think the year before. Expectations are like, you know, like, this is what we did, you did, I don't know.
Previous.
No, like,
Not
something.
scaffolding, what am I trying to say?
Scope of sequence. Clear,
So the previous years, what, expectations and strategies? I would say scope and sequence, just because like what style of writing, what genre. You know, they're not familiar with opinion writing at all.
You can just
Or narrative.
join
I
a
don't know
group.
where any of my people actually. Right now, it's.
Right. I'll give you one more minute at this table. For chart.
When we started this.
There's also another one. That's right. I was just- stuff.
Yeah.
Surgery.
Right.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, so, what do you-
Hopefully, I thought some of the really short goals is to get here.
And I'm going to ask you to rotate to the next chart, please. So go ahead and move on down.
or around your next.
I'm sorry.
This is an interesting group because we've got elementary and high school, right? Yeah, good perspectives here.
That makes me excited.
I don't see it.
I go to meet I get excited.
Or I can
I see their, like, I can make up that big. Okay, that was.
No, sometimes we can't.
Yeah.
I think that's too.
I get excited. I mean, so like, you said, this is. Or like the. This area, you know, it's not with every race, so it's kind of like the. English and like the best, you know, what a two is, but like they have some sense of skills, right?
Yeah.
Alright.
I'm just gonna sit down here.
Uh-huh.
Teachers. Doing a good job. This is- It's telling them it's-
Yeah.
Yeah, they know that's theirs, yeah.
And make it a.
Well, and you know what is exciting about like, we're at the end of class. So if you see something wrong, it takes how many hours, like, to be honest, like, maybe only show you. It's like, maybe don't show them, this is the first grade. Just kind of do, then do.
Share out.
Or you could take it to. I mean, so that's finally, when I get.
But I
One
get
class,
on
there's
this.
yeah, even if maybe they're a kid.
Yeah, get very concerned.
Here, but they did a really great job writing that. And that's something that people know. I know Janet used to do that, but just to like pull out sentences. She used those for examples. I never get around to doing, but I always intended to do that, because that's something that the students
Learn from my mistakes.
Like
It's so important to give the kids time.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to rotate to your next chart, please.
They should be around to every.
Where's
single
not to
direction.
east? East to the side.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Thanks, Vicki. I was trying to check.
Here's yours right here.
Oh, we're back to the north.
Yeah, we're on the.
It's like, where did that?
That's you.
Yeah. I get out of this one and how they apply. it. I do, I mean, like, kids have examples, but they don't always understand how to do that.
Yeah, it's not just looking at the one, but it's actually understanding what is modeled in front of you.
Feel free to emphasize
Do I put
anything.
and understand that?
Yeah, go for it.
Add to.
I don't like understand.
And know how to apply it, or.
After being at Destin for 2 days with EOC stuff, the word understand is like hated and despised. So I'm trying to come up with something that's more applicable than just understand.
Properly analyze.
It also gives them reflection.
Analyze and apply it.
Yeah. Properly analyze and apply it.
I did.
Why it doesn't matter. Good.
Thinking about also maybe not just.
Okay, this is what I'd like for you to do now. This is your last chart that you're going to be at. What I want you to do is look at between, there may be two groups like at a north or two groups like at an east or whatever. I want you to go ahead right now and whatever chart you're standing in front of, I want you to appoint a spokesperson. And this is how you're going to get your spokesperson. You're going to use the fickle finger of fate, okay? So when I go to 3, count to 3, you're all going to go ahead, you're going to point at the person in your group who is going to share. Okay, 1, 2, 3.
He didn't even participate, he was just like, no, come my way.
Okay, so if you were nominated, for your group, and you guys, I'm going to have you step out. Megan, I saw that you got picked on there. And so if you guys will, just because you're kind of back in the corner there a little bit, but what I want you to do right now is look at both charts. So spokesperson and with the support of your groups, you're going to look at both charts and you're going to come up with the, I'd say, one key thing that you think everybody in this room needs to recognize that was posted on that chart. So in East, what was really exciting about this? What's something you want for the good of the group to know? South, for you all, the steps to take, what's really important. So decide with the support of your group, what is on those two charts. North and West, you guys get your spokespeople together to make sure that you guys agree on which of those charts. Hey, this is something we gotta share. And if you absolutely can't decide, then you can share. All right?
Mayor says,
So
hey,
you guys
Philip.
can act together. Yeah, I think it's. I see it out, sticking people like that.
Like a mission statement.
Our I represent all of Is this the advanced ribbon code group? You guys have yours, all right.
You want us to go?
Right. How about over here? We are ready. All right. Randy. Research it and yes. And are you guys good? Have you decided yet? Or you know yet? About 30 seconds.
Oh, yeah, solid.
All right. Okay, perfect. All right. Yeah. Probably my computer timed out. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to go ahead and we're going to share out here. So I'm going to go ahead. Let's start. Well, I just have this wonderful view over here with West. So I'm going to go ahead and go with West first. So go for it. Randy, were you the spokesperson?
Yeah,
Okay.
we combined a couple of them by saying like, am I teaching it well to all the children with in all their varying levels?
And that is definitely a challenge, right? Because they are all over the place. It's not a cookie cutter model in writing, right? It's tough. All right, the other West group, did you guys, you spoke for all right, perfect. So I have to think North.
Yeah, so we kind of talked about what is the expectation, not just 9, 12, and 5, 8, that's our respective grade levels, but also what's the district expectation? What do they want us to have them accomplish by the end of their 12th grade year, by the end of their 8th grade year? And if we know that that's what the objective is, then where are they coming in at? What strategies have they used in the past? What have they done? Because otherwise we can't model it from that 8th grade to freshman year. We don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, I was just having conversation with Brian about that. It's just so important in a district your size, being aware of what others are doing at different grade levels and what that looks like. It's that scope and sequence. Yeah, perfect. All right, over here, Vicky and Michelle, right? That's Jackie. Oh, Jackie. Why do I keep calling you Vicky? I don't know. Hi, Jackie. I've known you for a
Vicky's
long
a nice
time.
name too.
Yeah. I'm just thinking. Okay.
I think we just talked about growth in general, watching students grow to be competent and then confident.
And we just said then when they get to recognize that potential in themselves and they recognize their growth and can explain to you where they've improved. That's the excitement part for us.
Definitely, very exciting there. And then, you know, when they're doing that, then they're becoming more confident. So it's kind of a circle, a loop kind of effect. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Jack. All right, and over here, Megan.
We got the steps to take. We started saying that they need to know the expectations, which goes back to them. Not only the expectations of what you're grading, but how the writing is structured in your classroom. What's that look like? They also need to know the process to that and the parts of the writing. And that feeds into the structure of whatever they're writing. So if it's a narrative, what's that structure look like? If it's an opinion, kind of, they need to know the steps actually in the writing process and the structure.
All integrated together. All right. Thank you all for sharing. I think it's really important sometimes to get those things out there. So we have that common mental model about what it's looking like as far as that need to know. What are those steps? What's the next steps really for you as a district? But also, what are those steps going to look like? How are you going to make that happen? But we also find out we have some of the same worries at elementary as you do at high school, right? And we all have that exciting piece where we want kids to be excited about their writing. We want them to be confident. We want them to be competent because communication right now, that's one of the things that small business and even larger business, they're looking at communication skills from for their incoming employees. We met with, through the Pathways program, the Career Pathways, with a business virtually. And he said one of the things that they have to go back and retrain a lot of their new employees on are communication skills, not only in verbal communication skills, but also in written communication skills. And it's not like writing like a paper or anything. It's more about how does writing look for them? He said they look at blogs. They look, at different things that future employees have posted like on the internet, but what their writing style is like. It's not just the same kind of writing that we always do, but he said they look for that. And then also look for team builders or team players, I should say. All right, so thank your partners, if you haven't been sitting with them, you can go ahead and go back to your spots. Thank you, thank you. So one of the things I want you to think about as we do these things, compass points is also something that you can do in your classroom with your students. So I want you to think about that because anything that I use with you today is something that you can take back and you can use with your students. So I want to show you a kindergarten example of what this looks like, because a lot of times in kindergarten, we think, no, this isn't going to work. But in this case, they ask kindergartners, what do you want to learn when you come to kindergarten? Right? So this little guy says, I need to know how to read and write more for his North moment. With this little one, they said, I need more quiet time. I mean, that's pretty perceptive, isn't it, for a kindergarten student? This one, what are you excited about? This one says, I'm excited about building with the blocks and playing with my friends. This one says, I'm not worried about anything. Life is good, right? So I'll go back to that in a minute. So I want you to think just a minute, talk at your tables about ways that you could possibly use Compass Point within your classroom, what we just did. Which pictured up my speakers, so that might help. Right, and then you can browse on the way out. Hey, does someone have an idea of how they might use this in their classroom setting? You're all doing a lot of talking, so I'm assuming somebody had an idea. Any thoughts?
We talked about, like maybe giving the kids just to modify it, giving them Post-its and having them kind of do a four corners kind of thing. And then they can post everything and then they can do just like a quick walk about the room, like as they do it.
Yeah.
And do it within time constraints.
I like that. And one thing too is have them do it solo first, you know, like I had you guys do. But I think I like that idea with the sticky notes. And they love sticky notes, right? Anyone else have an idea how you might use it? Maybe in a particular content area?
Sure, we talked about, and as far as like at the beginning of the year, that would, because sometimes you talk about doing it before a unit, but sometimes they don't even know what the unit's gonna be about, or, I mean, so they don't really know a lot of those, but it can, as far as like what they need to know and like the steps, and if they don't even know the steps, then that would tell you that where you need to start, and if they know all the steps, but maybe they haven't been doing them, then that can also.
So, yeah, and again, you can use it for instructional decisions. One thing I want to clarify for you too, you can make the direction, the cardinal directions stand for anything you want. So that's what I chose to use them for, but you can make them, you can make the N be anything, you could make the West be anything. So just an FYI, Kim.
I can let Jennifer speak, but we give, of course, the ready math diagnostic. And so Jennifer thought that this would also be very applicable before you did that diagnostic. We could ask the students those 4 questions regarding the diagnostic you're about to take. You know, what excites you about this diagnostic? What concerns you? What worries you? You know, those types of things so that you're showing them it can be used in multiple areas in each.
And I think that's applicable to when you are maybe starting out like something or learning something new. And like, I am so not a math person, like algebra just kicked my hiney. But, you know, if I've been able to do something like this, what do I need to know? You know, what do I need to help me be successful? You know, you think about it that way. What worries do I have about going into this? Well, I'm afraid I'm going to look like an idiot, you know? So it's just different things. It's just kind of a good way to get voices out there. And I, you know, showed you the kindergarten example, which is, you know, very interesting for the beginning of kindergarten. But of course, they didn't write the words down there. Their teacher did that, but they did the drawing. So think outside the box a little bit. All right, so we're going to get into a little bit more of our learning here. One of the things I always use this, I really like this little second grader, Ben, and what he's written. He wrote, somewhere in a time that's been somewhere on earth, there lived a small pipe rat. And after his teacher had asked him if she could share that at a workshop. And he's, of course, being a little second grader, said, sure. And when she came back, he said, please, Mrs. Skolnick, would you tell me what I did right in my story so I can do it again? So as you look at that, what Ben has written, what did he do right? What would you tell Ben? You can talk at your table if you want to about it, but you know, what did he do right? What makes this work? Or maybe it doesn't work to you. But I think it does. If a kid wrote So what did Ben do right? What is something that works here? If you were Mrs. Skolnick, what would you have told Ben? Yes.
It was very descriptive, that kind of hooked us and makes us want to know more about the small paragraph.
Okay, the descriptive words there, you know, makes you want to continue reading. It hooked you, right? So it has a good lead there. What else?
Establishing voice.
Very much so. How did he do that? I mean,
Just in
first,
this phrase on it.
right, through the phrasing, which again is tying into that sentence fluency. You have that piece where you have the flow there, but you also hear his voice. I'll show elementary an example, I think, tomorrow from one of my former students that was, I thought, pretty powerful. But, you know, it's one of those things where we have to really know writing ourselves well in order to tell the kids what they are doing well. And sometimes it's easy to get stuck into a rut and use the same kind of things, but really looking at it and analyzing it. So as teachers, when you're, and you guys are fortunate that you have teams to work with. I think with, or I know at elementary and probably middle school, I don't know high school. So, but being able to go through and score or look at student samples or writing samples together and talk about, hey, what's making this, does this piece work? Does it not work? Or is it kind of so? What can they improve on? I think just having that conversation is so powerful. Poor Mrs. Skolnick, she didn't know exactly what to tell Ben. She just knew it was really good and wanted to share that with him. So really we have to think about how do we get our kids there? You know, where do we get them to this point where they're writing like Ben and we can go ahead and support and encourage them. So one of the things I always like to share is about assessment, because everybody, we're always really, well, we're assessment happy, right? And it's sometimes not of our choosing. It's of, you know, you could get federal dollars, the state is required to show how kids are doing. So you get those types of assessments, but really the root word of assessment is acidary. And my Latin is not really good, or if it's Latin or whatever it is. So, you know, you can look it up because Google, they'll pronounce it for you. So if you want to look it up, that's fine. But when it really means, this root means to set beside. That's what assessment originated from, to set beside and really guide a student. And I think we're getting away from that. So when we think about like formative assessments that you might do in writing, it's helping not only guide you instructionally, it's helping guide your students into knowing what they need to know and do next. So keep that, I would jot that down someplace, because to me, you know, we really need to think about what is that true purpose of assessment, to set beside and guide. So that's what we want to remember. It's going to not only guide you, but guide your students' learning. So when you think about it, and this is one note I put in for me, that I really like this statement. At its most useful, assessment is an episode of the learning process, part of reflection and autobiographical understanding of progress. So they know where they are, they know where they need to get to be, you know, what their goal is, and they know how they're going to take the steps to get there. I know some of you probably have background in assessment capable learners, and that's what we do in writing. We set a goal for our students where we want them to be. I'm probably doing this backwards with you guys looking at me. But what's the goal? They need to know what that outcome is going to look like. Just like some of you were talking about, even as a district, you need to know what your goal is. So here's the goal. Where am I in relationship to that goal? And how am I going to close that gap? How am I going to get from where I am to where I need to be? And that's what assessment can do. It can guide and help you get to that next point. So as we go on here, I always use this when I've done, some of you might remember, because if you've been through 6th grade training with me in the past, I love this slide because it talks about a target. And students can they can hit any target as long as it's holding still for them. But sometimes it seems like that target moves. So we need to be sure that students know what that outcome looks like, what that goal looks like, because then they know what they're aiming for. So I want to share, and probably several of you have seen the Sarah video like umpteen million times, but you get to be umpteenth and one more, right? So with this, I want you to notice, first of all, watch this with the eye of what does Sarah know about herself as a learner, but then also think about Sarah's teacher. What does Sarah's teacher know, or what did Sarah's teacher have to do? So let's go ahead and see if we can make this work.
Sarah, can you tell us how this chart works? We'll point to them and tell us about it. I know nobody's on this, but some people might not be on this.
How come?
Because some people won't do that because we're in kindergarten, but some people might do that. Good. Now go further up the chart and tell us about the middle of it, Sarah, around the orange crayon. Well, some people sound it out and try and make their letters neat on this one. Good. And what about further up the chart, Sarah? Then what happens? On this one, they try to sound it out. They try to make their letters neatly and try to make the thing right. This is where I am. I sound it out. I try to keep them nicely written. I try to make the right words. I try to keep the letters with a space before they start. And I'm going over to here because it's the last step and I'm over at the 9 step. This is the 10 step.
Okay, so at your tables, talk about what does Sarah know about herself as a writer, and think about Sarah's teacher. What were some of the things she had to do? Okay, I'm going to ask you to wrap up your conversations. And I'm going to have you come back from 5, 4, 3, 2, and gotcha at 1. All right. So think about Sarah. What does she know about herself as a writer? Yes,
She knows where she wants to be by the end of the year.
she knows her goal, right? And she's focused on that. Very, very obviously focused on that. Other things that you noticed about Sarah?
You should do the teacher's expectations. She mentioned a lot that her friends or her peers even trying to do their best, do it neatly, to work on writing the correct letter formation. There were several things that you could just tell her teacher had reiterated over and over that she caught on to as well.
Right. Definitely. That teacher had done a lot of modeling and the students had been part of that discussion. So it was very powerful. Other things about Sarah?
I think she's a great peer role model too, to help show the other children how to think about the writing. And
Mhm.
she's obviously had the teachers modeled very well. So I think she's picked right up on that. I
Definitely.
would say she's, somewhat exceptional.
So
Yeah.
her vocabulary and enunciation are just
Right.
nicely written. That always gets me
But
every
she was
time.
very positive, like,
Yes.
they tried so hard to make their letters neat, I liked her. It is.
Yes.
It is, and it's one of the goals, it's like, oh, I can tell that's a letter.
Right, well.
And it's not on its side. You know what I mean, I just think
Mhm.
her ability to express herself, we learn so much from each other,
Mhm.
and even as teachers, we learn from our students, so I think,
Right.
that she could be a good role model.
Very much so. And again, like you mentioned, you can hear her teacher's voice coming out there because she obviously has heard some of these things. Now, thinking about her teacher, what are some things that her teacher has done? We, hit on some of them. What are some other things?
Very judgmental. She recognized it with the growth scale. And so
Mhm.
you might be here's how you progress.
So,
And that's
right.
okay.
So she has built that culture in her classroom that it's a safe place. So when you guys were talking earlier about one of your worries, how you have all these kids coming in at all different levels, hey, that's okay because we're all at different places, but we all have, the goal. Now, would all of the kids have that same, the 10-step goal? No, some of them would, eventually they would have, but they would have been moving, maybe if they were at on hers, the orange crayon or whatever it was, maybe they're trying to get to the next one, which was the blue crayon or whatever. You're setting those goals to make sure that you can reach the next step. So it doesn't become overwhelming because otherwise, it's going to blow their little minds, not only little people, but big people. You think about like some of your college classes that some of you are probably not too far out of college years. You look at that syllabus and you're like, holy cow, So we have to make these steps manageable. So her teacher has done something there to show them how you get to that next point. Anything else to add about her teacher? Marty?
I love that she posted, there is not a moving target. The kids can visually see what they need to do, and that can be any level.
Right. She has those models there. And that's something too that I always encourage teachers to do is to save samples, so kids can see it and let them have discussions about this. And And I think, really going through each of those and letting kids analyze those, that's so powerful to see where that fits on that continuum. Anything else with Miss Sarah? I always think if a kindergarten kid can do this, there's no reason like a 5th grader or an 8th grader, 10th grader, whatever can do this. It's going to be, harder because they didn't start maybe in kindergarten with it. So you're going to have to show them this is the way things are, but this process is pretty much the same to go through it with them. All right. So I want to go ahead and show you, I think, one more slide here. Oh, that's what I thought. Let's take a break here. You guys have been sitting a really super long time, except when you're up moving. So when we come back, we're going to visit the redwoods, like through writing in our packet. So go ahead and let's take a break of about till about 9:40. Does that sound reasonable?
Before you guys go on break, a quick announcement. Josh had asked about if you don't want to take the stipend, the money, and use this for PD hours to move over and turn into the PD committee for salary schedule placement, you can opt out of the payment to do that. If you want to do that on the sheet where you signed your name, sign your name, but draw a line through it and put PD kind of somewhere in that little block. And then tomorrow we'll have PD forms around for you so you can take a form and get it to the committee. So that's perfectly fine. Sorry I didn't mention that sooner, but I still want you to sign in so we know who had the training. Draw a line through it, put PD by your name if that's what you want. Totally up to you. Doesn't matter to us either way. Okay. And the sheet's still floating around here somewhere.
So
Sorry about the wait. Thank you. Good. So my daughter's working in congressional hunger. And one of the things they told them is that it doesn't matter what your background, what your degree is. If you're gonna work in Washington, you have to be able to write, and they will basically just shove you aside and get rid of you because you can't write. She's also getting biology, she's doing major in biology and economics. And one of the concerns is we're pushing, not as bad as anybody, we're pushing STEM. And they're the scientists. So people don't have to speak, right, represent their research, and so they're really big, starting to really push the science to integrate writing and speaking, so that represent your best.
Sweatshirts in that we ordered. Updates. So pick me up.
What that looks like. It looks like a social studies class. It's gonna be a lot.
They know. True.
Conversation. I've got some.
But the whole drama
things that I've
of
been
she's 14, that's what.
It's a whole different way to. So for me, those content area teachers, I don't see reading and writing as being a need. Because that's not what they went into. They went into it to be things. It looks nice. But yeah, they're so right. And that's like that business. You can't think about writing as writing. What, like I did a Charlie Brown cartoon very beginning about, what you did over the summer. We can't think about writing like that. We have to think about its application. I go, you were looking at content area. So that to me. So I think it's a lot of.
Just no fun. I was
It's a couple of years old, but there was an NPR story, and it was the top degree that Google was in was English. When they were hiring people, because they had all these computer science people that could give them all of them. But they couldn't work in one another.
Yes, and that's so right. They're like team. So, yeah, you're so right. I think all of those And in some cases, we're born boys consider soft.
Trying to be that encouragement.
I know my daughter, and she was in San Diego, she's saying such. One of the things, when she was looking for jobs out there, she said that they like to bring their kids with them. They know how to.
Yeah.
Just the constant cheers for her. Yeah, we should share that. I make space off, so you can remind me.
Okay.
I won't be offended. And that's necessary.
Are you doing okay?
Yeah, I just sat down for a while.
Okay.
Yeah, I told Brian, a half day, I think we can leave each hour through.
Yeah.
So,
Well, don't feel bad. None of us.
oh, I know, you guys are so good. You're understanding. I know.
So how does?
Yeah. How is the search changed my decision? Do you?
How are you?
And they said it was good. I was really into
We moved in quite a while ago.
their sentence. But she's all right. He just usually likes to still. And I love this. Big hair like those. So all of this is just the. And I think that some of that, I possibly, the doctor said yesterday that I swear, I did not notice it prior. And she said there is a possibility. You know, they did something to plug up a gland. And so irritated something. I go back to the doctor that did my surgery on the 26th next Monday and get the stent in. But it's just an office procedure. Yeah, so we'll see how that works. Well, I don't know either. So they're just gonna like take out stitches and. Well, they won't take out stitches, they'll just pull it out, they insert it through the bladder. They go up through their grief, yeah, go up to the bladder. And well, hopefully that'll just slide. Well, I'm hoping, they said it's a 2 to 3 minute procedure and it might be slightly uncomfortable, which typically I'm like, means it's gonna be. Yeah, so I'm going to take. I'm gonna take a break, for sure. Yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah, I'm watching the clients. Yes, yeah. And I'm drinking one of the drinks. She actually has coffee. Yes.
How about that?
She's nuts.
I
haven't. Well, I have anyway, sometimes depending on what it is. Oh, yeah. And on Amazon, there is stuff here now. I got a message. Oh, really? It's almost like a piece of paper on it. It's moisture. And then I feel it's like. Well, mine is just, it's not, I guess I take this in the morning and it's just like.
Thank you. You got a second?
After we take a picture of that box, but on Amazon, I have to buy it in a big of like 6 boxes. But over the winter, I used.
Oh, yeah,
You know.
yeah. I just get it in the shape. But yeah, I get some things. Yes, I do. Yeah. Thanks, Marty. So, do you need to eat? I ate this morning. Where's the scale? I'm sorry, I know, but I knew.
Yeah, I just stuck it in here because I couldn't read the whole aisle.
How are you, Betsy?
I'm good.
It's going.
But yeah, we need to sit as long as you need to.
Hi,
Yes, yes. it knows you.
And I told her.
Hi, Kate. I was like, that looks like Kate.
Yeah. How are ya?
Good. Were you talking? I'm sorry.
No,
She stepped away. She went on break.
I have COVID. I caught it.
You have COVID? Do you?
Yeah.
Oh, are you at home?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
It's
You're
okay.
supposed to be on vacation.
I was on vacation. I'm vaccinated and I still got it.
Oh, this is not good news.
And I have a
I'm-
broken foot.
Yeah, and Jared's on here with a broken foot.
Janera broke her foot? Oh my goodness. Janera, what were you doing?
Line dancing.
Where were you doing this at?
I'm not very graceful anymore. Well, I was barefoot and on concrete, or I don't think I'd have a broken foot, but
Tony Doolin didn't give you adequate lessons. apparently.
no, not
Was
at
this-
all.
Was this at a social gathering of sorts?
But there may have been some refreshments involved.
How do you
Not
stop-
many. I'm just not very graceful anymore. I'm getting old.
Well, Kate did that by herself on her kitchen rug or blanket years ago. Yeah. You two are a basket case. No offense. I'm staying away.
Yeah, it just, and Delta virus, yeah, they said that it's very contagious. People that are vaccinated are getting it, but they're not ending up in the hospital. So that's.
Yeah. Oh, that's awful.
We're getting ready to start again, gals. Okay, I think we're getting ready to get back. And what I'm going to ask you to do now is you have a packet and there's going to be a lot of stuff in here that we'll do, and there's going to be a lot of stuff in here that we won't do, just for time purposes. So one of the things that I do want you to look at, however, there's on page 2, there's a story of the Redwoods, and some of you have seen the Redwoods probably more times than you care to. But I just want you to refresh your brain. We're not going to do anything with it right yet, other than read it. I just want you to read it. And once you've read the Redwoods, I want you to go ahead and just give it a grade. You know, what would this piece, you know, what would you typically give a piece of writing like this? So if you're somebody that, you know, is, I don't know if you guys do letter grades or if you do, you know, some other type of grading, maybe you do exemplary, proficient, whatever you do, I want you to just go ahead and just jot it down on there somewhere. If you're using, like if you have a writing rubric that you're using, which I know several of you do have, if you think it's, you know, like, and just thinking overall, Would it be like if you're on a 6-point scale, would it be a 6, a 5, 4, 3, whatever?
I mean, I was thinking B or C, but I just traded.
That does trip me up when
I just felt like all she said was.
Yes.
Oh, I
Okay, so you basically just gave this a really cold read, kind of a just gut feeling about where you feel, like with your friends at your table, maybe you agreed, maybe you disagreed. You know, just kind of got a feel for it. So I'm just gonna set that off to the side for just a minute. Because we need to think about writing like this. Writing can be very overwhelming for a lot of people to teach. And when you think about it, we have to think of it like how you eat an elephant, right? So how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And so you have to think about it from that same aspect with writing. We have to look at it as just one skill at a time. Get that skill well, keep it there for review, go on to our next skill, just keep spiraling up. So when you think about the writing expectations in your class, I know several of you are already using 6 traits. Some of you are very well versed in 6 traits. And when you think about it overall, one of the things that I want to emphasize here, it's not a program. There are companies that have come out with 6 trait programs, but 6 traits was never intended to be a program. What 6 traits is, it's for teachers and students to have that common language when they're talking about writing. That you know, when somebody's talking about like details, I think were mentioned, you know what details looks like in sounds like in 6 trait language. And the other piece here is using literature. So you want to be sure that when I say literature, like I brought books, but literature or text in this manner could be any example that's written. It could be articles, it can be a poem, it could be a news magazine that's online, you know, but really it's the use of mentor text would probably be a better way to describe this. So having different examples that teachers can use to model and that students can use to see what writing looks like in different contexts. Some of you were talking earlier about narrative opinion, you know, expository writing, you know, what does it look like? And looking at it across the board in different text structures. So you have I think it's a blue or green, I usually try and color, I think it's a 6 trait rubric. And so this is what we're going to really be getting into right now is our 6 trait scoring guide. And so you have that one. Now you also have an informational one, some of you, but that's the one when I called the office and asked them to make copies, they made multiple copies of just one side of it. So you're missing ideas and organization and so on this one. So I'll get that fixed. I'll try and get a new copy made and bring to those and give it to you tomorrow. So there is an informational rubric as well. Let's stick that in there. So when you're looking at the 6 traits, one of the things that I want to have you look at here in just a minute, I want you to look at the language that's going across the continuum. So what we're going to do is basically unwrap the rubric or the scoring guide. Do you guys use rubric language here or do you call it scoring guide? Or do you just kind of interchange it and say, hey, it's all good? All right, so then you can know what I'm talking about then when I keep jumping back and forth throughout terms. So I want you to think about a couple of things here as you're looking at that sixth grade scoring guide. I want you to think about how do you share the scoring guide or rubric with your students in your classroom? How do you explain that? What kind of conversation or discussion do you have with your students? The other thing that I want you to look at here is looking at the language, as I mentioned, and I need to be going this way, I was thinking about different rubric, going down the column. So like you'll see ideas in the first column, then you see organization, then you should have voice, right? And then on the flip side, you're going to have word choice, sentence fluency, and conventions. Just look at some of the language, how the language changes between the levels, maybe highlight or do whatever. Did they copy the back side of it? Okay, on the white one it is. All right, so I'm going, okay, that's lack of communication, obviously. So Brian will make new ones of this. So on the side that you do have, which one do you guys have? Do you have ideas? Okay. So start with ideas. You have a blue copy. Brian is going to go ahead and make the white copy. If you have a white one, you're good because he did both sides of that. That was like my original, but I communicated with a colleague at the office and she found one that she neglected to tell him to do both sides. So when you look at your blue one, just go ahead and go down, start with the trait of ideas and notice how the language changes. Maybe highlight some of the vocabulary, transition words. What really jumps out at you? This is the most positive tool you can get. Thank you, Brian. The idea is hit and even to the right. As a parent, you would chuckle. Just I need to produce the ideas that just. I put that in very factual. I can think of several. But a few kids around here. She's glad she found the right packet. I went in and picked it up yesterday, but I didn't look at the rubrics. I
Yeah.
should have looked at those. I looked at my packet to make sure it was okay.
Gotcha. Do you have any actual copy of the informational one that you're going to make?
No, they just sent me the.
Just the
Yeah.
one? Okay.
Over on board. Yeah, I think, yeah, she just grabbed out. They're both the same.
Both the same, okay.
Yeah. So she did show them.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but that's one I'll use probably more with the middle school, and high school typically. what are some of the words that are jumping out at you as you look at the trait of ideas? What are some things that you think, is this really what I've been looking for? Is this something that I share with my students? Do you know any transition words that are going between?
I'd say the big one about me was that we're clear on 3 through 6, so it's really for clarity. And I know since we're all kindergarten back here, just getting them to the point where we understand what they're trying to talk about can be a challenge. Especially when we are also focusing on how to write the letters and you know, how to make that correlation with this letter makes this sound, or it could also make this sound, but we're supposed to do this one right now. It's an interesting process to get them to become more clear with their writing.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. How do you explain clear? What is clear? You know, what's clear to you might be, you know, totally different than a colleague. So that, I think that's one of my points in having people go through this is sometimes there's language in there that you're interpreting one way and your colleague across the hall might be looking at it in a total different way. So that's where, again, it's really important to have collaboration across, you know, or within a grade level, but also across the district about what that means. You know, what does this mean to you? I heard somebody talking about precise. So what is precise? What does that look like? What does that sound like? And I think it's very important to have that consistency. So this rubric that you have is used more for teachers to go over writing and probably like maybe 10th through 12th grade, 11, 12, around in there. I mean, they can look at, but my point is, regardless of what rubric you use, you need to make sure that you understand it clearly, your colleagues understand it clearly, and the students understand it clearly. When I say clearly, it means you're all on the same page, right? And then when you think about that, and you're going to get samples for your kids to look at, different writing samples about, you know, what is ideas, you need to be sure that, you know, the kids have time to go through this using that rubric and coming up with that same kind of language. And Sarah, you heard Sarah going through, she obviously, you know, the teacher had modeled, and they'd had conversation about it because she knew what neatly written was supposed to look like, right? So it's the same way, regardless of what grade or content level you're teaching, everybody needs to be on the same page. They need to have the same mental model. So that's one of my, I guess, reasons for having you go through this. And if we had tons more time, I'd have you go through a little bit more in depth and have more conversation about it. But I think it's very valuable to take that time to do that at the beginning of the year, you know, really going through and making sure that they understand that rubric or scoring guide and what that looks like. And, you know, if they start in kindergarten about explaining what clear is, then that's going to make it easier for the rest of you because you're building upon that. But you have to think about, I think this group back here mentioned about the objective, the outcomes for each grade level, about what the expectations are when they're out of 8th grade or whatever. Just some food for thought. Jamie?
One of the questions you're thinking about it. So like in 2nd grade, would you have something like that for each of the traits? Like
I would have,
or would you just have one in general?
I would probably have one in general to kind of illustrate, but then I would talk to the traits within each one. What makes this strong? That's one thing that you have to be kind of cautious about because not every paper is scored for every trait, right? So you could just maybe be focusing on like paragraph structure. That might be something where you'd have different examples of paragraphs, but within that paragraph, what's making it powerful? Is it because they wrote 3 to 5 sentences? No, that's not it. Please don't do that. But it's more about looking at it from, does it master whatever your rubric is for teaching a paragraph? Does it have something in there? Does it have something in there that, is it details? Are there relevant details in that piece? So looking at it with that eye a little bit more. It's sometimes less is more, right? So, and I think too, you can have your continuum about what you want your writing to be, but also it's going to be really important that your kids have that time to look at different samples and have conversation and discussion about, what makes this a strong paragraph. And they have that language of the traits to use within that. So I don't think I would necessarily have it divided up per trait. I think I'd have a piece of writing, but then having the kids know the language of the rubric would be probably the more powerful. I'll show you in elementary a sample tomorrow from how one teacher approached that. One thing too is for K through 2, there's a different rubric that I usually recommend people use. It puts it more in your language at the primary levels. So I don't know if everybody got one of these, but if you're a primary person, you'll want one of these. You guys won't. So you can look at that. Anybody else has some thoughts on that for Jamie? We'll have some more conversation about that tomorrow, because that's a really good question. So we're going to go ahead and get into the traits right now. And, I spent oh my gosh, a lot of time going over that initial part, but I always like to make sure we have that solid foundation before we go ahead and get into the traits, because otherwise I won't quote John Antonetti, but he has a really good word about how you can screw up the process of something. So I want to be sure you have that piece. So we're going to go ahead. You just looked at the ideas column on your scoring guide, and we're going to talk a little bit about what ideas truly means. When you think about it, it's here they refer to it as the heart of the message. And when the traits were first came about, they were, goodness sakes, many, many years ago. Vicki Spandau, Ruth Cullum, those are big names in Sixth Trait land. They were teachers, just like you all are, and they were scoring, I think it was state samples of writing. It was like out in Oregon, Idaho, somewhere like that. And they kept noticing the same commonalities that they were all looking for. And that's how the traits came to be. Now, Ruth Cullum added a +1 to hers. She added presentation. Vicki Spandau just says it's already embedded, is how she chooses to look at it. So just a food for thought. When you think about ideas, the trait of ideas, there's that clarity, that clear message that we were talking about. It's focused and it has quality details, noticing the little things that someone else might not notice. So when you're thinking about this, we want it to be sure that it has the pieces in there that need to be in there, that aren't weighting it down too much. Narrow and manageable size. There's your focus right there. So with this one, I want you to go back and look at redwoods right now. So you have redwoods. Look at redwoods and see from the eye of ideas, how would you score it just from the trait of ideas? So get your rubric out. Let's see. Excuse me. compare with your table partners.
But it sure was easy to read. It was like, that's a compliment.
Oh, I thought.
Okay.
It's just that they didn't.
Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this. And as you're looking at your rubric, and by the way, they do have rubrics that are just 5 point, but everybody kept saying, well, if there were a 4 on there, I would have given it a 4. And so they just went ahead and broke it down to 6 point because we're teachers. So, and even now with this one, I still hear people say, well, it's kind of between a 5 and a 6. Well, then put a plus on it. You know, it doesn't matter, whatever. So when you're thinking about this, how many of you would give Redwoods a 6 per ideas? A 5. So 4. 3. Ooh, lots of 3s. 2s. 1s. Okay, so lots of 3s. So when we look at a 3 on here, which of those bullets kind of describes Redwoods? Yes.
I would say the generalities of Bill are definitely outweigh quality detail. It's one of like the big ones that hits.
Okay. Anybody else?
Look at the title and then read the paragraphs. If the title hadn't been there, I probably could have given it a 4, but the Redwoods are not mentioned at all.
It's one of those things too, where, okay, well, yeah, you get ready to read about Redwoods and there's nothing there at all to do with it. So if we were talking to this student and we were going to go ahead and we were going to give them a 3, like I think several of you were saying, what is the evidence within that piece that you would talk to the students about that illustrates this? And this isn't saying a 3 is bad, it's not. It's a place where they can go from and grow. So where are some places in here that back up your score of a 3? Or if you gave it a different score, what's the evidence within that piece that backs up that score on the rubric? So if we say it's fuzzy, underdeveloped, where's a place in there that you would want the students to go ahead and develop that further?
When we got tired of that, we just had a wonderful time.
So right there, that's a place where you might want them to elaborate. Any place else?
Exciting and fun.
Yeah.
Right. So when you think about this and you're sharing this with a student, we think back to our worst experiences as a writer. How are we going to share this with them? We know that where there are places where, you know, it was fun, but how do you share that with a student? Yes.
I mean, I would, if I was looking back at this, I would maybe ask them specifically, where did you hike? Did you hike in the Redwoods? Per se? Did you
even go to?
Did you strip in a public pool, lake, river? Like, just give specifics a little bit more than the general.
So do a little bit more questioning.
You can also, like in the second sentences, the weather was sunny and warm. It's like, okay, you're starting to do a good job with the detail there. What was it like in other places? And so you can talk about, when you're talking about sensory. It's also something that we started when we first were like, what grade is this person? What was the prompt? Are they supposed to write about, like, that was something that we just started talking. It's like, what is this for?
And I think that's something that needs to be discussed too, because we have the narrative, but we have the redwoods. Is this person supposed to be writing about redwoods? And they wrote a story instead?
Yeah.
Because if so, then they're not gonna get a 3.
So there's a lot of things here. And one thing that we don't want to do is, like you were all saying, you want to encourage your kids. You want to be sure that they are confident writers. So you have somebody who they put down, they've done what we assume they were supposed to have done. But then we have to think back, when we go back to that rubric, how are we going to justify that score? I was at a training with Vicki Spandell one time, and I was with a colleague. She was attending with me, Peggy Harwood, and we were disagreeing about a score. And so I said, well, I'm going to go ask Vicki. She's like, well, okay, you do that. And so I marched myself up there, and I just said, I think this, should be the score. My colleague thinks this, I'd like to get your thoughts. And she said, there's not a right or wrong score. There's a score you can support and justify. And that's always stuck with me. And so that's what we have to remember. How do you justify and support the score that you're giving? And that's what we want to do for our students, is to go in this piece of, this kid's going to say, yeah, I did it. I did what you told me to do. And yeah, so what? Yeah, it's about the redwoods. Talk about trees, or whatever. But we have to think about, back in this piece, where was it fuzzy? Where did they need more details? You guys have elaborated on that. The other thing I want you to remember is, again, thinking about bad memories as writers. Don't overwhelm your students with too much, because you could totally rip this piece to shreds, right? The redwoods. I mean, I look at it and I just cringe every time. I've seen it, I don't know how many times. But we want to start out with giving them a few examples. And you mentioned, Jackie, about sensory. That would be a place for them to start. What did you, smell, or, touch, whatever, bring in some sensory details. Again, when you're thinking about the trait of ideas, it's clarity, it's getting them to narrow in on that focus, to really think about what's noticing those little things that others might not notice. So as they stood there and they looked around the trees, they saw, they felt, whatever. So getting a little preachy, I'm sorry, but less is more. Anything else so far about ideas here with this piece? All right. I'll tell you more about little I know about the author later. So one of the things I like to use, and when I would share this with students, was I told them you have to zoom in. You have to really, when you're thinking about the trait of ideas, you're zooming in on those little things that, like, just if you had a pair of binoculars, how it zooms in and helps bring things into focus. When I was teaching, which it's been several years ago, we had overhead projectors, right? Or is that right? I will say that you'd put the thing on there. Well, that's how I shared it with my kids. And you could do the same thing. I just made it blurry. So I said, if you don't have that trait of ideas, it's just like looking at stuff that's kind of blurry. You can't see it real clear. And so then I'd bring it into focus. And I said, how's that help? And so that's how I explained the trait of ideas to them. So with technology today, I'm pretty sure you can do a blurred zoom background if you want. That would help. But you want them to really zoom in on those things. So this is really super hard to see with the light. I wonder if I don't know if the blinds would help or not. But what I want you to do right now, if that's going to work, I want you just to think about at your tables. I want you to zoom in on this picture to see where do you think this picture was taken? What are some of the things that are really jumping out at you, if you can see it very well? I don't know, those people at the back, I don't know if you. Jackie's gonna do the light. She's got it. Oh, yes, that helped a lot.
Oh, you think it's an airport?
The lights over there.
Oh, are those?
Is it you suggested and there's.
Yeah, I thought that was.
Oh. So let's go ahead and think about, you're focusing in on those details, you're zooming in. What are some of the things that you notice here? Heard somebody say taillights. What's something else?
Lanes.
Lanes. Okay, the poles here, I don't know, like here and here. Where's some other things you notice?
See what looks like a lesson, where it's at.
Oh, like over here.
It's after a ball game. Yeah, it makes me think of exiting the parking lot of the Chiefs and the Royals.
Oh,
You know,
so-
I don't know.
So you're thinking that might be a sporting event because you've got multiple lanes.
Right, 'cause everybody's got their lights on ready to try to get out. And it's chaos.
Okay. Anything else that you can see or notice? If I get out in front of it.
It's dusk.
Oh, dusk, time of day. So this is what you want to do with your students as well. You want them to get in there and focus on those details that just don't, jump out at you. They always want to look right at the big picture. But let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit and look at some of those details that are less than obvious. Now, all of those details that you're noticing are also guiding your thinking about where this might be. So like Michelle was saying, she thought it was after a sporting event because of all these things. Anybody else have another idea of where they think it might be? Which,
I thought a border crossing.
a
maybe.
border crossing? Okay, anyone else?
I thought maybe it looked like a factory and it's like morning.
Oh,
Everybody's sleeping on the work.
The thing that I'm kind of with what you're thinking, because like the thing I was like, they're all going the same way, like, so it didn't look like a parking lot where you would see people facing each other. And it does almost look like barbed wire on the left side there above that fence, like there.
and you're up closer, so it's a little bit easier
Right.
too.
They got the brake lights on.
Okay, so I can, oh, airport. So I'll share border crossing is where it was. My husband and I were on a bus. The tour buses were over here to the right. We've been into Mexico for a day trip, and we're coming back through the border crossing at Tijuana, which I just wanted to get back across, the border. They said, you don't, a lot of you have probably been into Mexico, but our bus driver, he was pretty adamant. You do not talk to the customs agents. You only answer if they ask you something. You just keep your mouth shut. I'm like, okay. So I was terrified, but anyway, I just had to take a picture of that because I thought, holy cow, all these people, just lanes and lanes of traffic. And that was just one side, going back into the States. So, but what's important here is looking at the details and what helped inform that decision. Think about even in relation to reading, when you're inferring something, what are all those pieces within the text that are giving you those clues or hints? And sometimes as writers, we need to help our readers to be able to visualize what we're talking about. So I always started out with pictures when I was talking about the trait of ideas with my students and getting them to zoom in on those things that are less than obvious that others might not notice. One of the things too I have done, I think I got this on the next slide. So let me look here. Oh, I did, yay. All right, so I have used black and white photos as well, because a lot of times I found with ones where colors, the kids will focus in on colors. you give them black and white, you know, that kind of shifts that just a little bit. Now, if you're a content area teacher, I would be picking out things from my content area about, like, if you're social studies, for example, like a particular image from history, and I would have them look at that. And a lot of those are, you know, black and white as well that you could utilize. Science, you know, you could do an image from science. I think I've included some of that for tomorrow. But anything you notice that jumps out at you on this one? Bunnies. What'd you say?
Bunny, rabbits.
Oh, yes, the rabbits. You know, I didn't even see those because there's something on the chalkboard that just draws, yes. Right here, that beaver right up here just always draws my eye. And I look over here, this kid with a, it's like he has a sailor suit collar on. I just think this is such an interesting image. There's so many different things in here. Does anything else jump out at you that you noticed? Yes, their clothing. Oh, yeah. Dress code has really changed, right?
Looks like there's 2 teachers.
Yes, there might be, like, we don't know. I kind of wonder too, maybe this child got in trouble.
That's what I thought.
Right? So when you go ahead and you give students an image or something like this, just, you know, if you're working with younger ones, just have them go ahead, give them a little bit of think time, always give that think time, and then ask them just to share out a little bit. And you don't always have to have them write a full-blown story or paragraph or something about this, but just have them go ahead and jot down details. What do they notice? Have them get up and compare with a partner. What do you notice? What helps make this come clear to you? And letting them have those conversations and that introduction, if you will, to the trade of ideas can be pretty powerful. Now, one of the things that you can do is once you have gone from that, like an image, you can also use text. I brought books just because I'm a book junkie. You know, being here in the library, it's really hard. I saw a bunch of Dean Koontz books over there and I was going to pull one up, but I thought, well, that's probably not very professional of me to be reading while you guys are working. But it's kind of like my happy place. But you can, again, always use other forms of text. So keep, you know, the articles, newsletters, whatever. And I want to read an excerpt for you here from Roald Dahl, Boy. And this is kind of a memoir of his, talking about when he was a young boy growing up in, I'm trying to remember, he was from like England or Scotland, somewhere around there. And he's talking about a candy store they visited. The sweet shop in Llandaff in the year 1923 was the very center of our lives. To us, it was what a bar is to a drunk or a church is to a bishop. But it had one terrible drawback, this sweet shop. The woman who owned it was a terror. We hated her, and we had good reason for doing so. Her name was Mrs. Pratchett. She was a small, skinny old hag with a mustache on her upper lip and a mouth as sour as a green gooseberry. She never smiled. She never welcomed us when we went in. And the only time she spoke were when she said things like, "I'm watching you, so keep your thieving fingers off them chocolates." Or, "I don't want you in here just to look around. Either you forks out or you gets out." But by far, the most loathsome thing about Mrs. Pratchett was the filth that clung around her. Her apron was gray and greasy. Her blouse had bits of breakfast all over it, toast crumbs and tea stains and splotches of dried egg yolk. It was her hands, however, that were the most disgusting. They were black with dirt and grime. They looked as though they had been putting lumps of coal on the fire all day long. And do not forget, please, that it was these very hands and fingers that she plunged into the sweet jars when we asked for a penny worth of treacle toffee or wine gums or nut clusters or whatever. There were precious few health laws in those days, and nobody, least of all Mrs. Pratchett, ever thought of using the little shovel for getting out the sweets as they do today. The mere sight of her grimy right hand digging an ounce of chocolate fudge out of a jar would have caused a starving man to go running from the shop. But not us. Sweets were our lifeblood. We would have put up with far worse than that to get them. So we simply stood and watched in sullen silence while this disgusting old woman stirred around inside the jars with her foul fingers. Okay. I'd like for you to do is just do a quick sketch of Mrs. Pratchett, the sweet shop owner. I move some stuff around and I have to remember what slide I put in next. Okay, and I want you to share what you have so far with people at your table and see what you don't say, oh, I can't draw very well or thing like that. You tried. That's what's important. Okay, this is
For you to have arrows.
Yes. Okay, so what were some of the things that jumped out at you about Mrs. Pratchett? What were some of the things that you drew? Her hands. Is that a little bit more prominent in your picture? How did you show her hands? Gross. Dirty fingernails, maybe. to darken those.
I put like really sharp nails.
Oh, sharp fingernails possibly. What else did you have? The frowning face. Mustache, right? You know.
Puckered sort of now, like she's
Oh.
had something sour.
Okay, her lips are puckered. I had a student, when I did this with my students, she drew Mrs. Pratchett and she was holding something. And I said, tell me more, tell me what about this. And she said, well, it's a fork. And it was like, it looked like a pitchfork, because she said, you either forks out or you gets out. So she had that was kind of an interesting lead in that we could have instructionally. But this, what Roald Dahl has done is he has brought in those details that help you visualize what Mrs. Pratchett looked like. You were able to draw a representation of her because of the details that were included. So when you're talking about the 5 senses, bringing the senses in, that's what we want our students to do. And that's going to help bring clarity again, when you're thinking about the trait of ideas. I can't remember. Oh, I did bring this. Stephen King. I like Stephen King a lot, but, and this is one book that's not as bizarre as some of his others can be, The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. But one of the reasons Stephen King is so good at terrifying people who read his stories is he helps you visualize it. He puts those details in there that others might not notice. And one thing too, when you're using text with students to talk about different examples, you don't have to read the whole book. I didn't read all of Boyd to you, right? But it still got, kind of helped you to visualize. So if I wanted my students to work on details and use, to bring something alive for students using the 5 senses, we would talk about that. We would break that down. How did Roald Dahl make that come alive for you? What did he help you picture in your mind? And going back into the story, so when you're talking about the fingernails, what made you think the fingernails were really long? Going back into that section and talking about it. So, and what I want to say to you first, so I would start out with images when you're talking about the trait of ideas, especially with the younger kids. But even with some of your older ones, if it's a new concept, start with an image, because our brains like that, right? You dream in images. You don't dream in words. So we want that to come alive for them. And one of the resources that's out there that I love, and I don't think it's utilized very much, is the Library of Congress. And we'll talk to you more about, we'll talk more about this tomorrow. But they have what is referred to as a primary source analysis tool. And I brought you copies of this that you can use. But the link, and I may have hyperlinked this. I'll take you here, and you can just go to loc.gov. You can just do a search and teacher resources. But the sheet I printed for you, the primary source analysis tool, you can access it here, but you scroll on down. There's different ones that you can use to analyze different types of sources. So looking at different printed text, manuscripts, oral histories, newspapers, maps, political cartoons would be probably something very interesting to do. Different photographs, but this is a great site, and there's a lot of free things on this that a lot of teachers aren't aware of. So like I said, I just typically go to loc.gov and you put in teacher resources, and it's very helpful. So let's go back to our PowerPoint here. Should have thrown one. There we go. I have to look at everything I have open on my computer. So if we went ahead and we went back to this picture, I could go ahead and use that primary source analysis tool to have you guys respond in written format to this image. And we're going to do that tomorrow with some different examples. So what you know about the trait of ideas right now, would you change your score for Redwoods? I would say probably not. I think if anything, it might make some of you, if you gave it a little bit higher score, think about it and looking at it in a little bit different way, taking it down a notch. So when we think about the trait of ideas, we want to think about how you can go ahead and link it to what you're currently doing. So anytime you're pre-writing, if you're making lists, like in the younger grades, you'd probably do a lot of listing. That's something that will lend itself to the trait of ideas. Anytime you're doing brainstorming, that's linked to the trait of ideas. If we could get our Redwoods author to go ahead and focus on maybe what one tree looked like, then that would be the trait of ideas, zooming in and focusing. Being careful observers. Oops. I don't know what this is, but that's interesting. Borrowing ideas from other writers. And when there's talking about that, that's again that modeling piece. So if you wanted your students to go ahead and describe a person that they knew, like Roald Dahl did here, then you could go ahead and link that into the trait of ideas, borrowing those ideas. But one of the most important things is that knowing that purpose. Why are we doing this? What is the purpose behind this writing? And a lot of times kids don't, that purpose isn't clear for them. They have to be, how many of you get the hand up? I don't get it. What are we supposed to do? That kind of thing. I used to have students just say, okay, I want you to turn to your partner and I want you to explain to your partner what we're going to do. And then your partner is going to ask you some questions. So again, with writing, anything like that, you can have them go back and just be a little bit clearer on things. Then we get into the trait of organization. Okay, so with organization, it's your framework for writing, just like it's the framework for a building, is how I think of it. It gives you that structure. It gives you that purpose a little bit more clearly. So when we think about it, we're thinking about the internal structure. This is where effective transition words come into play. Be word collectors here with those. Making sure that our words and phrases flow together, that they link. We're able to transition from one paragraph or one sentence to the next. And an effective ending. I think that's huge. A lot of times we focus on that inviting opening or that hook, but then they get to a point they don't know how to wrap it up. Some of you who are teaching narrative writing, how many papers do you get? Or it was all a dream, or, and then we went home, the end. I used to go berserk if I had kids write the end. I know it's the end of your paper because you aren't writing any more words. You don't have to put the end. You know that. So when you think about this, I always think about it as with your leads and getting them hooked. It's like a flashlight, right? You're guiding the way. That's what a lead does to help your readers, invite them in. And this, John McPhee says, leads are magic flashlights that shine down through a story, showing the writer what to put in and what to leave out. And when you're thinking about how you are structuring or organizing your writing, that's what you have to do. Because that lead, that's that introduction into your paper to show the reader where you're going to go next. It's that next step. And in some cases, they can go ahead and have maybe multiple leads depending on how the paper is structured. So with this, one of the things I want to share with you, and I also want to clarify for you, is there are a lot of different structures that you can use to organize writing. We typically think about, like a 5-paragraph essay. If you're at a certain level, you have a structure for a research paper. There's multiple structures you can use. One that I always thought was kind of interesting was like the alphabetic structure. You can organize something like an ABC book. So this is the Skull alphabet book. Jerry Pallotta has done, I don't know how many, but I always like this one. It's warning, this book contains the alphabet. If you are afraid of the alphabet, do not read any further. So with this, then he goes into letter A. This is a science book about mammal skulls. The skull is the head of a skeleton. Leg bones, arm bones, rib bones, and back bones are not in this book. A is for, we're not telling you. As you read this book, you'll have to use your skull. Actually, what is in your skull? Your brain. Can you guess what animal this is? Think, its skull is perfectly shaped for eating small six-legged creatures. So, anteater, whatever. B is for, we are still not telling you. Did you think we were kidding? Every skull tells a story. Be a detective. Look for clues in the different parts of a skull. And of course, he goes on throughout the whole alphabet. One thing that's interesting in this book is it has hidden pictures of presidents in different sections of it. So I just thought that was interesting. And somebody asked me that, that was going to be his next book at one of the trainings I did. And I said, I have no idea. So I just got online and wrote him an email and said, hey, is your next book going to be about presidents? And he said, no, it's not. It's actually about, I think, eyes. And he went ahead and sent me a free copy. Yeah, Eyeball Alphabet book was his next book. But what he has done is he has taken very pertinent information and he's just structured it in ABC order. It's the same, you get the same information as I would get in a research paper. It's just structured a little bit differently. You have to be very concise and think about what you want to include. Yes. So it's a different structure to have kids use for organization. What are some other structures that you guys are using for organization in your papers or the writing that you're having kids do? Just talk at your tables a minute. I'd be interested to think and hear about what are some of the other forms.
But that's fine. I don't like it. Person like Jack. Many of them. I've seen more and more. Follow reading.
Okay, just in the interest of time, I'm going to cut you a little short here, but what are some of the structures that you're using that kids are being exposed to?
I don't know if it's a structure, but we use the first grade.
Foursquare, yeah. It gives you a structure.
We talked about how we try to get a third grade away from Foursquare because it seems to limit them to, they think the story is just 5 sentences then. So we try to give them other organization methods and other like making books and just different ways of organizing their writing.
Okay. Anybody else have a different one?
Timelines.
Timelines. Sometimes you have to think a little bit outside the box. There's different ways to do things. I've always, I've suggested in the past that when you're starting with the younger kids, you give them a structure like Foursquare or something like that. So they have a tool they can fall back on if it's needed, because not everybody's comfortable with that. But then you want to go ahead and expand their horizons and give them other different types of structures, because certain structures lend themselves better to other types of writing. Barry Lane is somebody who is really good. He has a book called The Reviser's Toolbox that's just excellent for different writing structures. And I meant to grab that. I have a copy and I forgot to, but he had some different versions. One way he has it is like for summarizing. Okay, kids struggle with summarizing, right? They want to throw in everything but the kitchen sink into that. But when we think about it, that's organization. We have to give them a structure. So this is one format that they could use. So you give them a certain number and tell them this is whatever your content is, then they can go ahead and figure or think about what is important to include in this piece. So you're kind of crossing over still into the tree of ideas because they have to remember those really key pieces. But you've given them the organizational structure here about, on this one, the topic was rainforest. So what are 6 ways of looking at the rainforest? So 1/3 of their surface, giant medicine chest, something to say, oxygen factory, lumber yard, dreams up in smoke. That give you some good information about the rainforest? Somebody thought it was humans there. Rainforest is pretty. Here's a couple of others. 3 ways of looking at Columbus. Great explorer, bad map reader, mass murderer. Yeah, so pretty deep there. 4 ways of looking at a fraction, common denominators, decimals in disguise. I want the big half. So when we think about this, what I want you to do is I'm going to have you try this. And I want you to do it with teaching. So I want you to have 4 ways of looking at teaching. 4 ways of looking at teaching. 4.
It's 3/4 of a way to look at it.
I think I cut it off. Yeah, I think that's just a mistake on my part. Is this? Maybe.
Like this reviser's toolbox.
Mhm.
Is that probably a good one?
Yes, it's a great book. It's really good.
It looks like it says it has student examples. and all sorts of
Yeah,
stuff.
it's really good. It's kind of eclectic in some ways, but it's a really good book. I've used it. And I know this is from 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird by Wallace Stevens was where this idea came from. Yeah, I think it's just something positive. Yeah. So if you've done more, if you're doing like, if each individual person is doing these at their table, I want you to share out with your table. If you did a table one, if you work together as a group, share it with another table when you get it finished. What's our time tomorrow, Brian?
8 to 11, it's just 3 hours.
8 to 11.
12 to 3.
Okay, that's what I was trying to remember. I know you said.
I read the first.
The writing thing.
Yes, I love that book.
Okay, that's using internet. Okay, I was just actually looking at that guy.
Yes, it's a good book.
Is it good? It's expensive, I think. I can buy it used, it's still even used, it's like 36. Okay.
Just remind me.
Yeah, well, that's what I was looking at these three. Okay, that say they had the three that they recommended together.
Oh, are you looking at the?
Mary Lane. The
He's
revisor's
good.
toolbox.
He
and
is a,
How do you teach writing? And
Yes.
that's after the end, those three together. Did you see that?
Yeah, I was just.
Because I had thought about getting the used copy of the revisor's toolbox.
yeah, it's,
$20 for.
it's an old book, but it's wonderful.
No, I just thought it was cheaper than that, Brian.
Oh, really?
I thought I found it cheaper for a used copy. Maybe I didn't.
Okay, so.
Sorry.
Oh, no.
Does anybody have one they want to share out? We'll pick out, I'll take two. So who wants to be the first one to share theirs?
Mini rolls,
Mini rolls?
mini rolls.
Oh. So good. Interesting. I hadn't thought that. Somebody else have one. Take one more. Yes.
Foundation of Society.
Ah, yeah.
That one, yeah, needs to be put out for everybody to read on social media, just your generic response. Okay, so I took two of those. One of the things I want you to think about here, this activity is based on 13 ways of looking at a blackbird by Wallace Stevens. And what you want to do is, first of all, make sure that the students have some of the facts about the topic. And then think about different points of view too. Because think about, who's going to be reading this, who's going to be looking at it. So, well, I had you do the teacher one. Well, what if that came from the perspective of a student? Or the perspective of a parent or an administrator? So you could get into real interesting conversations, I think, here with that. I'm gonna sail here. Something else, when you think about the trait of organization, exit tickets are a form of organization. And not only exit tickets, but entrance tickets coming into the class. So you're still getting students or giving students a way to organize their thinking. So if we think about it, here you can go ahead and score them if you would like to score them. That's up to you. How many of you currently use exit or entrance tickets? Thumbs up. We have several of you using those. So when you think about it, you can leave them a little bit more open-ended. What questions do you still have? What would you like me to review in class? Why? If you were going to teach this to someone else, what would be in your notes? That's one of my favorites right there. What were the three most important ideas you learned today and why? Now, I don't know if I stuck this in this particular handout or not, because I was a little pressed for time. Nope, I didn't. Sorry about that. So this is something, though, that I think can be very powerful if you even flipped it to entrance tickets. What questions do you have before class today? And I think the second bullet, what would you like me to review in class today and why? Some food for thought there. So when we think about organization, organization is all about strong leads. Bringing them in and hooking them, knowing their audience. It's got to be clear, coherent, it has to flow. Work all together, be focused. And in some writing, depending on the type that you're doing, it might have formal introductions, it's got to have supporting evidence and conclusions. We'll do a little bit more activities when I can meet with you guys, more grade level specific tomorrow on this, but I just want to kind of give you some food for thought today. So then we go ahead, we get to our next trait here, voice. Now, voice is pretty powerful. I do want you to go back to the scoring guide and just look at the trait of voice. And just look at the difference between the levels on this one. What are some of the words and phrases that jump out at you around voice?
Or distant.
Distant. Why does that one stick?
You're just not connecting with your reader, really. You're just kind of there. Sharing feelings.
Mhm. I agree. And I like how they use that in relation to the trait of voice. What are some others that kind of jump out at you as far as voice goes?
So we're enhanced.
Enhanced.
Not just the content can be there, but when there's voice, it's like an extra.
Well, it does. I mean, it goes ahead and it makes it more than what it was, right?
And to piggyback on that, Jackie, I circled on number 4, spontaneity. I can't spit that out. But that's just like in conversation, some people are just really boring speakers because they don't have a joke or anything. And that just adds a flavorful bit that makes it interesting.
There is,
authentic.
yes, authentic, exactly. And that's one thing when you go back and you look at redwoods, and we'll do that in a little bit, to think about that trait of voice and where that falls. One of the things too in voice to remember is most kids don't become aware of their own voice as writers until about 3rd grade. Some, again, that's not a hard and fast rule. Some kids might be writing with voice prior to that, but they're just not aware that they're writing with voice. Some kids, when they're older, never seem to find their voice. They struggle with that. So again, the modeling of this is key in doing some lessons around the trait of voice to help them recognize that. I think can be very powerful as well. When we think about voice, again, it's that knowing your audience is really what this boils down to. And it's when you read something by the author, you know exactly who wrote it because you can just hear them coming through that piece. When you hear or read something like by Stephen King, like I mentioned earlier, his voice is very different than maybe like Jerry Seinfeld, who has written some different books. You know, you could tell them apart. So, and think about that from the books that you share with students, you know, and I'm like the Babysitter Club books have a different voice than maybe Matt Christopher, who did a lot of sports books. So different kind of context there. One example I like to share is why did the chicken cross the road? Okay, Oprah, we hear Oprah's voice. Well, I understand that the chicken is having problems, which is why he wants to cross this road so bad. So instead of having the chicken learn from his mistakes and take falls, which is a part of life, I'm going to give this chicken a car so that he can just drive across the road and not live his life like the rest of the chickens. Because there's Oprah. Nancy Grace, that chicken crossed the road because he's guilty. You can see it in his eyes and the way he walks. Or Dr. Seuss, did the chicken cross the road? Did he cross it with a toad? Yes, the chicken crossed the road, but why it crossed, I've not been told. And Colonel Sanders, did I miss one? Excuse me. So we'll look at some different examples of this as well tomorrow, because it's very interesting. Once you think about it, how you can hear that voice. I'm sure you've gotten papers turned in before where kids haven't put their name on them, right? That you can tell not only by the handwriting, but you can tell by the voice of the piece who wrote that story. So we'll look at that. So this is one that I like when you're talking about voice. This is Mary Poppins. And so how many of you are familiar with Mary Poppins, the movie? Yeah, pretty much everyone. Okay, so let's watch this. Okay, so is that like what you've watched? You've seen that Mary Poppins version? Okay.
More interesting.
Okay, so more, it might make it more interesting. What did they do in order to make Mary Poppins a little bit different than what we're normally accustomed to? Okay, the music. What else?
Yeah.
The frames were taken, yeah, out of context. I heard something else over here. Okay. Yes. What else did they do? Somebody just said it back there. Right. And how did they do that?
I didn't see any penguins in. Took like all the dark scenes.
Right.
All like darker.
Right, exactly. They just totally changed that with the, you know, the perspective made it, the shading, everything darker there. Yeah, the filter. There was something else, a scary voice, I think I heard somebody say, you know, how they narrated it. Did you happen to notice like they'd have little different subtitles, things come in, you know, hide your children. So a lot of different things that way. That's what voice is. You can change the voice of a piece by changing the, maybe the music to it, changing like the filter, the coloring or whatever. And this is a good way to get kids used to, you know, what voice can be. There's a lot of different ones of these. There's a Toy Story one too that's very, I think, funny. There's one about The Shining by Stephen King, only it's a family fun movie. Totally flip side there to it. So with a lot of things that your students are going to be out doing in the world, I think this is something really important to show them, you know, about voice, how it can change. You have to think about your audience, who you're changing the piece for. Any other thoughts on this one? All you have to do if you want to Google it, Scary Mary, and it'll come up. And then it'll link you to some of the other different ones. Bless you. So as I mentioned, images are so powerful. We looked at those earlier in the trade of ideas. So if we look at this piece, every image we look at evokes an emotion. So when you're looking at this one, what emotion is evoked? What's the voice? So just share at your table what you're feeling right now as you look at this. Not what you're seeing, what you're feeling. Soldiers lying down. I thought it was a simulation, like we're all dead. This is how we use that. All over. Yeah. So what do you think? What are some of the feelings that this image evokes? Does anybody feel fear?
Fear with us.
Fear? Anybody feel joy?
I felt gratitude that I wasn't in that situation.
Okay, gratitude that you're not the person dealing with that.
I don't know, I looked at it as like selflessness that they gave, so to help those people in the military, but I think that comes with your scheme and your background, you know. I'm thinking of the military, what they've done, what they've sacrificed for others.
And so then that's what that emotion helps you with, right? So again, you can go ahead, you can have different feelings, but an image, a picture, sometimes even just words like or a phrase will elicit some type of emotion. That's voice. You know, it's what you're feeling. And that's what you want an audience to really connect to. So you have to be very conscious of who your audience is when you're writing, to think about, okay, how am I going to connect to them? I think I stuck this in, yes. The Hokey Pokey, took the Hokey Pokey, but William Shakespeare wrote it. So taking it out of context from what normally would be done, putting it in a totally different role. Oh, proud left foot that ventures quick within, then soon upon a backward journey you lay. Anon once more the gesture then began, command sinistral pedestal to right. Commence thou then the fervid hokey poke, a mad gyration, hips and wanton swirl, to spin a wild release from heaven's yoke. Blessed dervish, surely canst go, girl. The hope, the poke, banish now thy doubt. Verily, I say, 'tis what it's all about. So you have to know, you have to have word choice as well here. Another trait that comes in, but taking something that's very familiar and putting it in the style by a different author can really make you think a little bit more deeply. I was talking about images. Harriet Tubman here. So we all know the time period when she lived, but what if she were here today? What would she say or do if she went into McDonald's? What would she do or say if she went into Walmart? Making it come alive in present our present world, you know, how would she react? What do you think she'd say or do? So that's kind of another just take on, or twist, if you will, on voice. Taking a character that's very familiar out of their time period, putting them in a different place or time can be something that you find out if your students really understand that character and where they were from and what they believe. As I mentioned, the Barry Lane book earlier, he has some really good examples in there of that. Here's another one. In this case, this could be one that we could just go ahead and use for, you know, getting students to, what emotions are they feeling? What do they think this lady is saying? What do you think the animal is feeling? All of those are voice. What about this one? Saying, doing. If you were the cow, what would you say? Moo. So getting kids to go ahead and respond this way. Same thing. Let's at your tables, talk about where do you think they are? Anybody have any thoughts? We're going to come back to some of these images tomorrow as well. So when we think about voice, what we're thinking here is a voice is going to help the writer feel safe and accepted, but also the reader to feel safe and accepted. If you're going to go ahead and share this with students, you need to be sure and show them different examples of what voice is like when you come across it in different text features. You're writing to someone. I know back in the day, I had my students write from the perspective we were studying, was doing a geology unit, and the different types of rocks, and the rocks were stuck in the wheel well of a car, and what the rocks would, you know, say to the driver of the car based on the type they were. So if you were, and that's been a long time since I've taught this, but an igneous rock or metamorphic or sedimentary, whatever those were. I know there was a metaphor. I think that was something else, right?
Metamorphic.
Yeah, that's. So anyway, when you think about those kinds of things from that context, you know, what would that say? What would you tell the driver? You know, hey, help, get me out of here, I'm breaking up. And they could share their knowledge base. If your kids are trying out different voices, let them go ahead and do that. But it's one of those things that they'll need to play with because it's not as easy for them. And again, just hearing the voice of others. So get into word choice right now. Sorry, I keep watching my time because I'm going through some things fairly quickly here. With word choice, on this one on the back of your rubric, if you look at that, again, look and see what are some of the words that jump out at you. This one's over Yes. What are some of the words you're seeing here that help clarify word choice for you? Powerful. Okay, I'm going to take you back right now to Redwoods. I want you to go to Redwoods, and I would like for you to score it for voice and word choice. Or not word choice yet, excuse me, just score it for voice right now. We're going to come back to word choice in a little bit. Just score it for voice. Okay, for voice on the Redwoods, anybody give it a 6? 5, 4. Got a 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so we had a little bit more variation here. One of the things to remember is when you're scoring with colleagues, if you have scores that are adjacent to each other, so if you did a 4 and a 3, for example, that's not, you can usually work around that, not a huge deal. If you have more than one number difference, then you need to have some more conversation and find the evidence in the piece to support your score and justify it and have that conversation with a colleague. So if you gave it, let's see, we had some people give it a 3. Where's the evidence in Redwoods that supports your score for voice? Anybody have, anyone that gave it a 3, where did you find your evidence in your writing for your 3?
We just said, we think it was sincere because it's kind of deciding to be together as a family. I love my family. Talked about doing things with your parents and your brother, like each.
Okay.
Sincere, but it's pretty distant. It's not. What about the eye? Yeah, it's not connected.
Right, right. Oh, and this is one piece too, that sometimes people tend to score higher because of the organizational structure. Because it is, it does have the organization, but like you said, with the voice part, it's distant. And it has some places in there where, they are talking a little bit more about family and things. They're a little bit more familiar, but it's still, lacking. Anybody else have anything to support their scores. Some of you, let's see, didn't some people give it a 2? Okay, what's your evidence for the 2? Go ahead.
I mean, just looking at kind of how they say they use the same sentence structure over and over, it just feels a little bit too formal for what the topic might be at this point. And it also doesn't seem like they're too involved in it as well, because they're not really giving those details that you want. They're not giving it their really own voice. It's like, I took this from the template and I'm gonna highlight it to something. It's like,
So that's a case where the organizational structure may be limited what this person could be doing, how they could be writing. Other thoughts on this one? You know, there is not a lot of voice evident. You know, I'm pretty much in consensus with you all about voice being evident in this piece. It is very distant, as I think Katie was talking about. And that's where, again, when you're talking about voice, sentence fluency and word choice are very akin. They're cousins, if you will, to voice. That's how you make voice come alive, is through the word choice. In some cases, sentence fluency as well. One thing too, when you think about and especially when you first start teaching word choice, kids start to become like little thesauruses. You know, they just go ahead and like every big word they know, they just stick it in there just because they think that's what's going to, you know, give them a great score or make it a great piece of writing. So you have to be a little cautious about that. Sometimes the kids will be experimenting a little bit. Like if you've done a lesson on idioms, then they're going to go ahead and maybe throw that in there, and they'll overuse it at first until they really get a solid handle for it. Because, you know, that's what we all do. We want to go ahead and we want to see a model, right? And then we'll go ahead and follow that. But then as we become more comfortable with it and ourselves as a writer, then we'll go ahead and expand our thinking here. Again, images can be really evoked through the right kind of word choice. Like in the book Boy, how Roald Dahl brought that Mrs. Pratchett to life for us. You were all able to draw. It was because of the word choice that he used. So with that, one of the things that I would like to have you do is think about an activity to build word choice here. So we're going to go ahead, Pop-Tarts or ice cream. I want you to pick one in your brain right now. Okay, and I'm going to give you 60 seconds to write about Pop-Tarts or ice cream, whichever one you chose, but you can only use each word one time. Each word one time. So you're going to have 60 seconds to write. You can only use each word one time, and your topic has to be either on a Pop-Tart or on ice cream. And your time is going to start now. And stop. Wherever you are, just stop, finish that word. If you're on a word, sometimes that drives people bonkers, not to write out the rest of the word, but just stop. Okay. Go ahead and share yours at your table.
Oh, I forgot.
I just say the word.
I'm gonna use the word dog and word dog.
I just put ice cream in the first.
Any other list? Good ways. I just started right now.
What?
Okay. Come back in 3, 2, and 1. How did you feel when you were doing this activity? Rushed? Really had to sail along? Anything else that you felt when you were doing this? Sometimes, it really takes you outside your comfort zone when you can only use each word one time only. And really thinking, how did anybody find that they did repeat a little bit when they were sharing? I mean, the is one of the most common words in the English language. It's difficult to write without the more than once. Oh, well, good for you. Okay, with this, when we think about our students, it gets students to think a little bit outside the box, helps them be a little bit more creative in their writing. And if you ever do this with your kids, one of the things to do it 10 days in a row, 10 consecutive days. And then after that, you can use it at any point in time, but you want them to really get proficient with being able to do this. You can go ahead and do it on the same topic if you want to. You could, but give them choices each time. Maybe the next day they'll do ice cream if you were about Pop-Tarts today. Or you could go ahead and have it with different presidents, or you could have it with different animals, dog or cat. There are some different things out there. Just kind of a good way to get kids thinking and using some of the vocabulary that you're wanting them to use. And when we think about the vocabulary, what's going to come in really helpful for them is having vocabulary word walls. And that can be in any content area. So think about the words that you want your kids really to know. You want them to really remember. Those are the words you're going to put up on your vocabulary word wall. I know some math teachers in one district who made a math vocabulary wall. That's been super helpful. It could go ahead, you could have and I know the primary grades, you do word walls, everywhere. You can call them different things, whatever you want to call it, but you want to have just words posted wherever. I like this example of this school right here. Words associated with the auditorium, clap, auditorium, applause, science. Down here, words associated with taste. Here, this is a math vocabulary. The other thing here that I want to draw your attention to is that it's accessible. Sometimes we put things up too high for some of the younger students. It just becomes wallpaper. They're not paying attention to it. So whatever you have, you need to be sure that there's a way for the students to interact with the vocabulary. You're not just going to post it on the wall and forget about it. You're going to come back to that vocabulary word wall if those are words you want your students using, not only in their writing, but also in their conversation. And just be creative. I know people have hung words from the ceiling. There's a One science teacher I knew covered half of his whiteboard and made a vocabulary word wall out of it. It's also powerful if you can have the students organize it and be word collectors themselves. So here's some other examples. Here's one from a PE class, had it posted in the gym. Financial literacy. And you can see here, it looks just a little bit different. We have some visuals here. This is a science word wall. They have mass, gravity with the formulas, energy, this formula posted. So think about your content, what you're teaching. If you're a classroom teacher where you teach all the subjects, you know, you can have interchangeable word walls. Maybe you're going to focus on science, then you're going to focus on social studies, literature, whatever works for you. So we're going to do an activity right now. It's called Adjective in Detail. And this is in your handout. Let me find the page. I think it's in here. If not, it might be something we have to look at. Oh, yep, I did. Okay, it's on page 18. So when we're thinking about adjective in detail, there's some words that we talked about earlier that on your scoring guide, your 6th Street scoring guide, that are a little bit abstract. You know, you have to, you know, we were talking about clear earlier. What is clear? You know, how do you explain that to students? So adjective in detail takes a concept like that and makes it understandable for your students. So this one is quiet. Quiet is not living by the freeway. Quiet is a silent cry from a bug right before it hits the windshield. Quiet is the sound of the dark closet. Quiet is what it takes to get to sleep at night. Quiet sounds like fishing on a lake in the morning. Quiet sounds like a windless winter day. Another word for quiet is hushed. One thing about quiet is that it never lasts long enough. So does that help you picture what quiet is? Yeah, you can understand it a lot better. Marty, several years ago, shared a book with me called The Black Book of Colors. You know, if someone is blind and they can't see colors, what is orange? What is red? It's a great book. I encourage you to look for it or ask Marty more about that book. Put you on the spot there, Marty. So what I'm going to ask you to do is just turn your page because there is a template for you to do adjective in detail. So I'm just going to assign some tables different words. Okay, so you can do this. So over here, some of those tired words too. Sad. You guys have sad. You two have loud. Let's have you two tables do mad. And let's have, let's see, our last 3 tables, let's go ahead and have you do cold. Cold. And follow the template. And I'll give you about 8 to 10 minutes to work on this.
Like, your life will change.
That does make it. Yes. Before you pull up the blinds in the morning, you hear the truck go on. I was gonna say something. Hard. Doesn't it just right on me? Not minutes. Okay, what were we? Seriously. Oh, I know I was. She's wearing flip-flops and I'm like wearing. I gotta put my hair in a bun. It's like January, she's like, man, right? The book shut or the checkout and I'm. No, I just always have on hold unless. She seems better. So you don't have anything special.
Do you, so you have about 2 to 3 more minutes.
Or I just and touch the snow.
I have to put some of this in tomorrow because I'm cutting out a bunch, just time.
We just had to do the one thing about full.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to finish up. Hopefully you got done. Does anybody want to go ahead and share theirs that they did at their table or where you are? See who got finished. Maybe I should ask that. Okay. You guys want to share one of yours? Did you do it as a team?
That was not the question.
Oh. Okay, you want to share within your group? You know what? A lot of times people think, oh, they didn't do, but they always turn out good. So that's all right. You're in a safe place. You guys can share within your groups. Did you guys do a team one? We did. A team? Anybody else use a team one that they want to share out? Or I shouldn't ask if you want to. I'm just going to say you're going to share. You'll be voluntold instead of volunteer, right? Okay. This is what I'll do. I'm just going to have you share with the neighboring table. Or if you did one with individually within your team, just share with people at your table. So go ahead and give you a time to share.
Shakespeare and like it.
You teach Shakespeare and like it. Yeah.
We're all ears.
Sad is not reading the book as you hear the rain on the roof. Sad is summer slipping away. Sad is watching your airplane take off with your relatives on board. Sad is the box of ashes on the shelf. Sad sounds like an empty house. Sad sounds like a quiet party. Another word for sad is memory. One thing about sad is it's okay to be sad.
Very well.
Very nice.
Yours was really good though. For all the high school kids to write, and they say you really are like poetic. I love Lexi White's take on you. Like, she's like, have you ever been in a class that you're the only one that's like hanging on every word? And I can imagine her doing that in your class. And lots of others.
Pretty much.
She's so nerdy, Shakespeare wise.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a compliment to her. Well, we won't read ours to you. It's not quite as impactful.
I'm just going to leave some of this stuff here. And this could be attached.
So do you have, oh my gosh. And
This is the PowerPoint. They copied up for me correctly. So you'll have the slides out.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm giving you trash, so.
That's right. I may scan it, and just send it out, and I scan this and send it to these guys, so I'll just send it to everybody. So, like,
Okay, let's come back here. Did anybody hear one that you might not have had time to share everyone's, I apologize. But since we're winding down here, did anybody hear one that they think would be great for the group to hear? You're like, yeah, theirs was all right. It wasn't that great. Not everybody can see that. Okay.
David was actually quite.
Oh, throwing you under the bus there.
Adjective is cold, but cold is the blister of the wind in winter. Am I supposed to go through all of them?
Yeah, yes, you get to do the whole thing.
Cold is not the sting of the flame. Cold is the formation of crystals on a winter morning. This one's more personal, but cold is comforting. Cold sounds like the crashing of falling ice shelf. Cold sounds like the first footsteps in fresh snow. Another word for cold is frozen. One thing about cold is it's contagious.
Whoa. Okay. Thank you for taking one for the team there. It's all good. You can get him tomorrow. Okay, adjective and detail is great too for, again, word choice, it's vocabulary, making sure that your students really understand the concept. So if you have an abstract concept that you want to make sure your kids get, try adjective and detail. I would go ahead and do one together, then let them work with a partner before I'd ask them to do one individually. This is something we're going to save for tomorrow, but it's a pretty powerful one. So we'll do generative sentences tomorrow with the group. But word choice really, it's all about just being word collectors. You want to make sure that you can get some vocabulary out that maybe they're coming across in their reading. If students find an interesting word or phrase, have them jot it down. Have a place in your room where you can post some of these different kinds of words that they could do it. Thinking about other ways that they could say it. I think a lot of elementary people are already familiar with this, but putting those tired words to rest. So when you're talking about sad, mad, all those kind of things, usually I throw bad in there. You know, this was sad, made me mad. It was really bad. You know, one of those things. What other words can you use instead of those? And listing those words that you really, really love. So this takes us to sentence fluency. And sentence fluency is pretty self-explanatory. It's just the flow of language. That was one thing that in the second grade example I showed you at the very beginning, somewhere in time, he had sentence fluency. He had that rhythm, he had that flow. And that was one of the things that really made that piece work, made it pop. Having different sentence beginnings. This is going to tie into transitions, which we're talking about in organization, the transition words. This is something that you really need to help kids explore and expand on. Sometimes it's helpful to give kids just a list of transition words, which ones can be used like to go between different paragraphs. How do we start? And I've given Brian a copy of all these slides, so if you miss anything, no, differences in sentence lengths and just variations. So one of the things that I use here a lot too is poetry. This is by Gary Larson, Far Side, cow poetry. Distant hills, the distant hills call to me. Their rolling waves seduce my heart. Oh, how I want to graze in their lush valleys. Oh, how I want to run down their green slopes. Alas, I cannot. Damn the electric fence. Damn the electric fence. Thank you. So, you know, you can look, you're going to see a lot of fluency in poetry. That's what makes it work. But can you find fluency even in text. There is a flow in a lot of written text that you can also identify. And that's when the author has used an effective use of transition words, varying sentence lengths, and just some different word structure or choice. So with this, well, like the writing roller coaster is something that I utilize a lot. We're going to do this instead of with this example. I want to use it with redwoods. So I think, I'm pretty sure here. Let me look and see. I put that in here. Yes, on page 20, I think it's 27. And on 28, you're going to see two different kinds of writing roller coasters. On page 27, this particular one is used more for probably the primary grades. Possibly some like maybe around 4th grade, maybe. The one on the next page, you can go ahead and use with upper grades going up through high school. So what you're going to do is you're going to use redwoods, and I want you to use the one for the high school on page 28. And the way that this is structured is the sentences in order go across the bottom and the number of words up the side. So go through redwoods sentence by sentence, and I want you just to color in or mark with your pen or pencil how many words were in the sentence. So I know you're finishing up, just interest in time. Now look at the roller coaster page, and I want you just to draw a line about how the words vary or the sentences vary in length. So just like you might do with a roller coaster, you know how you do it. So find the peaks and the valleys. What do you notice about redwoods? Was there a lot of variation? Was it more straight across? I know it. Did you see like a roller coaster pattern? Okay, so in this case, you know, it might have had some varying in sentence length, but the trouble with redwoods is it's lacking in the trait of ideas. It's lacking in voice, right? Word choice is very limited there. So something can be really strong in one trait, and that's something you could talk to the students about. it could be very weak in something else, and another trait that they need to focus on to set as their goal. So I think it's interesting to do with Redwoods because normally we're ripping it apart, but then you find some highlights. So that's something you could point out to that student. So with that, I'm just going to click through. For sentence fluency, when you're teaching that to students, just asking them about what made this piece work. Share some different examples with them. Poetry, song lyrics, music, really good for teaching sentence fluency. Sometimes kids have trouble with sentence fragments, and you have to teach them when those are effective and when they're not, because they'll see that some authors are using this and they're very ineffective in it. But some authors can do a great job with that. And then that would take us to conventions. So we're going to finish up with that. And I know we're getting down to the wire here. So everyone knows what conventions are, right? They have to be taught. The thing with conventions is they need to be enforced, if you will. So from year to year, be consistent. If you've taught one in kindergarten, make sure everybody in kindergarten is holding students accountable for that. Pass it on to first grade. First grade, they all know to capitalize and have a period at the end of a sentence. Now, this is the next step. First grade builds on that. Always hold them accountable because somewhere kids get away from that accountability. And then I hear from middle school and high school teachers that, oh, these kids, blah, blah, blah. So something just to consider. This one, I'm gonna let that go. Conventions for driving are very similar when we think about, we have conventions for riding. So in America, we drive on the right side of the road. In England, you drive on the left side. Steering wheel on the left. In the US, steering wheel on the right. Shift with the right hand, you shift with the left hand. We took a trip to Ireland a few years ago, and I tell you, if you don't follow their conventions, you will end up in an accident. We didn't, but there were a couple of close calls. It's kind of scary. But we have to have conventions for a lot of different things. We just don't always consciously think about it. But that's the way you might introduce it to your students. Think about how they do certain things. Well, for writing, we do this. I always shared with students writing, it's like when you have somebody spend the night at your house. What do you do to make them feel comfortable at your house? So you make sure they have a bed to sleep in, they know where the bathroom is, you have food that they like. Well, it's the same way with conventions when you're a writer. You're making that piece of writing comfortable for the reader. So with that being said, we're going to stop here because I don't want to have to rush through the next part, but we'll look at that tomorrow. And that at least gives you kind of an overview. And most people understand conventions pretty well. That's usually what's focused on pretty heavily. So I'll see you tomorrow at 8, whichever group is first.
Yeah, tomorrow, K5 is 8 to 11, and then 12 to 3 is grade 6 through 12. So hopefully you'll be back tomorrow. We'll see you then.
Yeah, sounds good. Enjoy the rest of your day.
I don't know if there's stuff that
I just figured I'd be.
yeah, and I think I'm assuming that the box has-
I'm not yet.
Okay,
So I will see you. I'll be there tomorrow.
Tony, you know where the sign-in sheet is?
Oh, yeah, I got it, actually. Right here.
Change yourself over to. Sure.
Are you leaving? Yes. Are you, okay. Good. Can I carry?